All right, and it looks like we are live, so that is exciting.
All right, should we like do an intro or something?
No, I think it's just going. It's just the thing.
Hey everyone, this is the RotoViz 2016 NFL Draft live show.
Boom, nailed it.
It's gonna be awesome. Okay, so Rams are on the clock, right?
Rams are on the clock. That is correct.
All right, John, it's your show. Tell me what to do.
All right, Matt. So do you need to go into and embed the link in the RotoViz Live thing?
Yeah, I do, but you need to send me the link. Can you send me like the embed link to do that? Or maybe I'm not even sure how you do this. If you just send me the link, I think.
Yep.
It's hilarious that we're doing this on air.
Nothing to do but to do it.
Okay, so let's see. You sent it to me, right?
Yep. Here's the embed. Here's the embed link.
Okay. So is it pretty much a foregone conclusion that the Rams are taking Goff right now? Hello?
Yeah.
Hey, also tweet out the link that you sent me earlier to like the Google Hangouts, so that if people just want to watch on the Google Hangouts, they can do that too.
All right, sorry, I was getting like a double lag because you were I was watching you on YouTube and getting you on
That's
on
funny.
Like the live feed as well.
Okay. I think this should do it. 1 second.
Yeah, so we're on air. We're watching the Rams pick. They have the first overall pick. Foregone conclusion that it is Goff. Matt, is that your take? And how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I don't really like Goff or Wentz. I feel like it's a situation where these teams need quarterbacks, and they've sort of forced their hand into moving up to take these quarterbacks. But like These aren't like the standard sort of like top of the first round quarterbacks that you typically see in any given year. So like I don't think either of these guys is at the level of the quarterbacks we had last year in Winston or Mariota. They're not, in the Andrew Luck, RG3 like type of range. Like I look at Goff and I see a guy who would be like a very fine second round like pick, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, like top of the second round, or like something like that. Or I look at Wentz and I think like he would be an interesting third rounder. Like I don't look at either of them and think that they are like first round quarterbacks.
Yeah, I saw a tweet earlier that was something to the effect of Goff is going to be, I believe, the first quarterback since like the 70s to finish his college career, or he'll have the worst career record as a starting quarterback of any quarterback drafted since the 70s, which I think is pretty remarkable, because usually, like we saw last year, like Winston and Mariota were both playoff caliber quarterbacks.
Right. I mean, here's one thing to think of. So you have that with Goff, and I don't know how important quarterback wins actually are, but I don't think that – I mean, it's not that they're, I think, totally insignificant, right? But one thing also with Wentz is, like, when was the last time that a small school quarterback was taken at the top of the first round? Like in the top 2 or 3 picks. Like, yeah. I think you're talking about, like, Steve McNair.
That was the name that I had.
Yeah. Like, it's like either way, like you are digging historically deep to find quarterbacks who don't look like the typical quarterbacks that other teams want to take.
Yeah.
So I think regardless of who is the first pick and who is the second pick, and I think it's a foregone conclusion pretty much that those two guys are the top two picks. I think it's something that isn't ideal, however it works out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Now, should we talk about let's look at the Rams, what is going on offensively with them, besides the quagmire of their quarterback position?
Yeah, so I was kind of looking at their roster today, particularly on the RotoViz fantasy efficiency app, and looking at their guys. I mean, they directed a lot of targets in some pretty inefficient directions last year. We're talking about guys Brian Quick was pretty painfully inefficient last year. Jared Cook, Wes Welker, Bradley Marquez, all those guys were about negative 0.25 fantasy points under efficiency per opportunity. So definitely some underperforming there. And I think particularly if you look at the tight end position, right now I think they have Lance Kendricks and Cody Harkey as their two tight ends. So you think at some point that they might go after a guy there. Kenny Britt was really their top guy as far as efficiency goes last year. I mean, what are your thoughts on Britt, Bailey, and Tavon Austin?
I mean, do we know what's going on with Bailey? So is he still suspended, or there was something and then he was shot in the face or something? There was something with in general, if a guy is shot in the face, that's when I no longer really think of him as a fantasy option.
Hey man, everyone gets shot in the face every once in a while.
Yeah. Call me crazy. Yeah, I mean, the thing that is definitely not going to help the efficiency of all of these players is a rookie quarterback. So I think it's just going to be sort of more of the same. Because the thing is, it's still a Jeff Fisher team. They're still going to be pretty much a 1970s type of football team where they're going to give Todd Gurley the ball 30 times a game and then give Tavon Austin 5 handoffs and 2 receptions and 3 punt returns and maybe he scores a touchdown, But I don't really see a world of efficiency for this team. I mean, really, I don't know what to make of Kenny Britt. Actually, I think I do know what to make of him. I don't make much of him, but he does have intriguing, I guess, lingering upside, sort of, but just not on this team. You know what I mean? He's a guy who is still probably athletically gifted enough to be a low end wide receiver 3 if he were on the right team, right? If he were maybe on the Patriots or something, he could do sort of a Brandon LaFell impersonation. Yeah. But otherwise, I just think that there's really not much going on here. I think it's basically Todd Gurley, and that's really it. Of course, and then you have the random touchdown games from Tavon Austin, and I think we will get those, but that's not anything you could really count on or predict beforehand.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting, and I tweeted this out not too long ago, is that every year since 2004, the Rams have had a negative point differential for the season. The next longest streaks besides the Rams are the Browns and Jaguars every year since 2008. So we're talking about a long time. The NFL Network right now is flashing this thing about Kurt Warner, and since 2004, all the different quarterbacks that have started. But yeah, we're talking about since 2004 that they've had a positive point differential in a season, which is a pretty remarkable and pathetic achievement.
It's amazing. I mean, the one thing that you can say is that this is still a defense that has strength. And so if they could just be competent on offense, maybe they could achieve their, franchise long goal of being 9-7,
Yeah.
It's the type of thing where on the one hand, I see how it's really tempting to think if we could just get a quarterback, right? And that guy could be decent, we could have a decent offense. But I don't see it with either of these guys. I don't know what I would have done differently if I were the Rams. Besides trading up, obviously I wouldn't have done that, but I don't know what I would have done differently.
Yeah. And I mean, it sucks for them too, just being having the Seahawks and the Cardinals in their division, doesn't give them a whole lot of time to really regroup. and return to relevance, because those are two teams that, at least for the 2016 season, are top of the heap. And the Seahawks don't look like they're really going anywhere for a while.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but their offensive line is bad, right? Like, it's not – they don't have a lot of strength on the offensive line. Like –
the Rams?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know the sort of the offensive line grade for them off the top. I know that they've spent some draft capital in recent years on some higher end offensive linemen. I think it was Robinson out of Auburn a couple of years ago. But I can't really speak
I think
to
there
that.
are a lot of things that haven't turned out well for them, but like I don't think going to get a quarterback now really would have helped them. This is sort of like the classic thing that Fantasy Douche says, like, why don't you build the rest of your team and have like an average quarterback, and maybe you can win that way. And if not, then when you get a quarterback, you finally have a pretty good support system around him. Like, I think they probably could have just been fine grabbing, a good offensive lineman high in the first round. Like, I think that would help whoever would have ended up being the quarterback, whether that was Keenum or Foles. That would have helped Todd Gurley. Like, I think that just would have been like maybe the more boring way to go, but I think it actually would have been like more of the plus EV way to go, as opposed to trading away everything to get a quarterback who doesn't look like a guy who should be drafted at the top of the draft.
Yeah. Now, what are your thoughts about who they have behind Gurley, or does that even matter?
So, I guess Benny Cunningham is an interesting guy, and who knows what is going on with Trey Mason, right? Like there are serious questions about that. So Cunningham is interesting. The other guys, Chase Reynolds, Trey Watts, like I don't really give any thought to those guys, either as like people who will stay on the roster or who would be able to like accumulate a lot of production. Cunningham is the most interesting of those guys because he does have potential as a pass catcher. That's primarily how he has been used. I think if Gurley were to go down, Cunningham actually could be an interesting guy. It's just a question of like whether you would anticipate that Gurley would go down. And with the running back position, like on the one hand, you should always anticipate that a running back can get injured. On the other hand, it's like pretty hard to predict when any injury will strike a running back.
Yeah. It's funny, man. I know that we know, or we presume to know, that Goff is the pick, but when you see that pick is in thing and that lights up on the bottom line there, you're like, oh man, what's happening? What's going on?
Are we there yet?
Yeah. I'm watching the NFL Network feed, and they've got the red pick is in bar lit up at the bottom. So it's real.
It's coming at some point.
Yeah. This thing is.
The first pick of the second generation Los Angeles Rams,
man,
will be, how surprising, a guy from California. Who would have thought?
Goodell struts to the podium to a chorus of boos.
That's my favorite part of the whole draft.
Right?
Them booing him.
Jared Goff's the pick.
Jared Goff. Everyone, write it in your notebook. Put it in your big board.
All right, Matt. So I don't know if you know about this, but we've got some fancy graphic cards here.
Boom!
Can you see that, Matt?
I can see that. It looks good.
All right, so we've got the Jared Goff card up. See the age, the size. Matt, do you have any thoughts on the size issue with Goff? Is him being 215? Is that? Does he feel fragile or frail to you at all?
No, he doesn't really seem all that fragile because like a guy who's I think it depends on the type of 215 he is. Is he like the Teddy Bridgewater type of 215 where he gains a whole bunch of weight before the combine and like everyone's surprised that he's actually 215? I think it's a little bit different because he has the height. He's 6'4", so he can afford to put on more weight and become like more of a like conventional type of like built passer. So I'm not too worried about the 215. Like it just seems like he's a 21-year-old guy who by the time he's like 23 will probably weigh 225. You know what I mean?
Sure. There was a good article from Benjamin Morris over at 538 who wrote about quarterback weight actually being a significant variable in the model that he was building. I think it was for career passing yards, or something along the lines. It was a yardage metric that he was solving for. Yeah, he talked about weight. And actually, I think, for example, Russell Wilson is a guy people talk about a lot, and they say, Russell Wilson was small, but he had big hands. But actually, the thing about him is I think for a 5'11" guy that he weighed like 224 or something like that.
Yeah, he was built. He's built like a running back.
Yeah. So that was definitely kind of an interesting read. So it's funny that you mentioned Teddy Bridgewater. You know, if you're still looking at the player card, if y'all can see that, I can take it down. But at the bottom, we had some comps. Teddy Bridgewater was one for sort of having a little bit of a leaner frame, a similar career in terms of career attempts, some different passing metrics. Obviously, the higher draft capital was a thing. One thing that I looked at too a lot was career rushing yardage. And Matt, I don't know if we've talked about that, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. That's something that I had a tweet about it the other day, you know, got some traction and people were, you know, kind of asking, you know, what is this all about? And, you know, in the college game, sacks count as negative rushing yards. So essentially someone who finished their career with negative rushing yards would indicate that they've got sacked a lot. And some people say, well, that's their offensive line's fault. Don't hold that against Jared Goff. But do you think that there is some element of that says, you know, maybe he struggles with getting his team in plus situations, or maybe he lacks the athleticism to avoid pressure, or you know, maybe he just struggles to even recognize the right kinds of things and escape and get the ball out of his hands as to not take a negative play?
Yeah, so I can't remember whether this was a RotoViz radio episode or a numbers game episode, but I remember there was a guy on a show who I think he was a mathematician who had done research on this and was talking about the fact that for the most part, quarterback sacks are on the quarterback and not on the offensive line.
Wow.
And this was particularly in the NFL context. So it might be different in college, but I think that's probably something that's translatable. Like for the most part, like a quarterback has the opportunity to get rid of the ball unless he just gets hit like within a second, right? But for the most part, it's on a quarterback if he gets sacked. And just separate from that, you know, like I've tried to build some quarterback models, kind of played around with it before, and I haven't done it in about a year, but I do remember one of the big things was that there were very few successful NFL quarterbacks who had negative rushing yards in college. Like it's something that you don't see that often. So that's not a good sign. You know, it's especially for a guy on a team that does have an offensive line who struggles. Like I think quarterbacks, when they are good, can hide their offensive line. But if it's a rookie quarterback who has a history of taking sacks anyway, like I don't think that's going to be very good for him or for the team.
You know, Les Snead really needs a RotoViz subscription because in that tweet, we saw that all three of the Rams' top quarterbacks right now, Goff, Foles, and Mannion, were on this list of highly drafted quarterbacks, top 3 rounds, with negative career rushing yards. And you think about it, and you're like, well, obviously the Rams have a type, but you wonder, are the Rams going astray with their type? So
yeah,
but that was kind of interesting. All right, so let's move along. We've got the Eagles on the board. The pick is in. Presumably this is Carson Wentz. Any reason that you might think it's not?
I mean, no. I was going to try to say something smart-assy there, but no, it's Wentz. The thing is, like, I think the Eagles are a better situation than the Rams. So, you know, regardless of whatever you think about Jordan Matthews, right? Like he's there. He's had some pretty good production for 2 years. You know, Nelson Aguilar is still a first-round pick, even if you don't think he's worth it. You have You have Ertz there to play
Yep.
tight end. So there are some weapons there. And you also have Darren Sproles as a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. Like, if I had to be one of those guys, I would prefer to be the guy going to the Eagles. I think they actually have more potential, especially also because it's, I think, not a better division, but a better division in which to be competing, because I think the competition is easier than having to go against the Cardinals and the Seahawks, right? 4 times a year between the two of them. So,
all right, and there it is. The Carson Wentz pick is in.
Can we talk about Sam Bradford? Like, this is a hilarious
we can
situation.
Talk about a lot of stuff, and we have a couple questions that we've got too that I want to make sure that we get to at some point.
Let's get to those. Let's get to the questions.
Well, we've got the Carson Wentz card up here, Matt. You can see some key stats about him. Something that I kind of look at, and I think is interesting about all 3 of the top quarterbacks here, being Wentz, Goff, and Paxton Lynch, presumably, is that they had incredibly strong arms up in the 57, 58 miles an hour range. If you pay attention to Benjamin Albright at all, he says sort of 55 and above is what you'd like to see out of a quarterback. I don't think we've ever seen anybody throw it above 60. So these guys are on the stronger end of the NFL spectrum. One thing that kind of interests me is that what Benjamin was talking about on the most recent RotoViz radio is that 1 mile per hour can be as much as a 3-foot difference over let's say a 15-yard out route. And I thought that was a pretty amazing thing, that 1 mile an hour makes that much of a difference. But pulling it out to the kind of the macro level on Carson Wentz, I mean, you look at him, he's got more of the prototypical size. Matt, what do you think about a guy? I mean, Wentz, for being a 23-year-old senior, was really, he didn't have a lot of career production.
Mm-hmm.
He sat for a couple of years behind a career starter there. What are your thoughts on Wentz?
So I think I like the Blake Bortles comp in terms of just like the size, even the throwing velocity. The thing is, and also like the career rushing yards. So unlike Goff, Wentz is a guy who can run decently well, but he's really had only those 2 years to show what he can do, and he was playing with this small school, like the big fish in a small pond. He didn't have nearly as much production, I think, as you would want to see out of a small school guy. Mm-hmm. I guess the one thing you can say is he didn't throw a lot of interceptions. I mean, I guess that's good. He didn't throw a lot of passes either. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, I think like he's a very dangerous pick. Like, if in 3 years you could just look at it and be like, you know what? Like, shouldn't it have been obvious not to draft with the top 2 pick a guy who went to a small school and who was older and didn't start his first 3 years and didn't have many passing yards? And like, I mean, I can just see that so much downside with this pick that it makes it hard for me to focus on the what I think is a low probability that it actually turns into something good for the Eagles.
Well, the thing that I do like about it, though, and we can talk a little bit more about the Eagles here in a second, just on kind of a macro level, is that the Eagles really have done, I think, some good succession planning. And so we'll talk about, for example, they've got Sam Bradford ahead of him on the depth chart, presumably. They talk about Bradford and Chase Daniel really carrying the load for this rookie year and letting Wentz have that time to develop. What are your thoughts on just guys who get that extra time? Because I think, for example, that makes a world of difference for someone knowing that they have the time to develop, learn the playbook, get acclimated, versus someone who's going to be thrown right away into the fire, like I think Goff is. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So this rarely happens anymore with a guy who is chosen high. So I think the last instance of this we have is Carson Palmer with Cincinnati. And I mean, obviously that worked out well for him. And, maybe his career could have been very different if not for that torn ACL, if not for, like the elbow issues that he had. But he's still had a decent career for a guy who's had some issues. But I don't know. Like my sense is that if a guy is taken that high, he probably should be used right away. Like I think it's a waste of an asset to take a guy with the plan not to use him for 25 or 20% of his rookie contract. And so you're taking the calculated risk that he ends up being more productive in years 2 through 4 or 2 through 5 to make up for that lost production that you're not getting from a first round pick in year 1. It's a pretty big risk, a pretty big assumption that you actually have the internal ability to make that work.
Yeah, but we've seen it pay off a little bit. Aaron Rodgers, for example, sat for a little while. I want to say that Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees, there was some overlap with them.
That's true.
So there is some kind of precedent. I don't think Eli Manning started until maybe the 6th or 7th game of his rookie year. I want to say that Kurt Warner was still in front of him there.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely some precedent, but I think the results are probably mixed. I just think it probably gives guys the best chance to succeed. But we will see. So San Diego is on the clock now, almost universally across the most highly regarded analysts in the industry. Goff, Wentz, we're going to be 1-2. We get down to the Chargers and the Cowboys and the Jaguars, and this is where things are really supposed to get interesting. There's potential that the Jaguars could move up and trade with the Chargers. There's potential the Cowboys could trade back if their guy doesn't get to them. But we're looking at Chargers here on the clock. Offensive line is a huge need, whether that's Laramie Tunsil, whether that's Ronnie Stanley, maybe Jaylen Ramsey on the defensive side of the ball. But that offensive line was so bad last year and really has been. Going back to 2012, Phillip Rivers has been sacked the 3rd most times in the league. They haven't really invested too much in the offensive line besides DJ Fluker in the last 5 years. So you think lineman would make sense here, but Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think lineman is probably the way to go. I think it's almost certainly not going to be a skill position player. But I mean, other than that, it's sort of like this huge question mark. They seem to need so much help everywhere that it's really hard to know exactly what they're going to do, except they're not taking a quarterback, they're not taking a wide receiver, they're not taking a running back, they're almost certainly not taking a tight end.
Yeah, well, here the pick is in, and they didn't trade it. The fact that they didn't trade the pick is a big deal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think offensive line or core defensive player like defensive line, linebacker.
Holy shit, they took Bosa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Defensive line. It's I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I guess the one thing means that the Cowboys aren't going to take him. Yeah, but I will be. Go ahead.
And this is the outcome that I was rooting for as a Giants fan, because if there was any chance that, I mean, Zeke to the Cowboys is a hot thing, right? But if it's not Zeke, it's got to be Jaylen Ramsey. And so the fact that they're both there and the potential for the Cowboys to actually go ahead and take Ramsey, let the Zeke stock slip a little bit. There are all sorts of potentials where the Dolphins could trade up for him. A couple of teams like the Browns or the Giants could take him. Things get really interesting too. You even got the possibility that the Titans could trade back up and try to get either Tunsil or Ronnie Stanley at offensive tackle. Presumably they were going to take Tunsil 1 overall. There's a chance they could trade back up and get him still at 5 or 6. That's pretty interesting. This Joey Bosa pick by the Chargers is, I think, a major inflection point for this draft.
I mean, the thing is, I would have assumed that Bosa was going in the top 5 anyway. You know what I mean? So whether it was like DeForest Buckner or someone going to the Chargers, however it worked out, I would have assumed that Bosa would probably be gone in the top 5. I'm really hoping that the Cowboys don't take Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts more on Ezekiel Elliott and why it seems like you are very hopeful that the Giants do take him. But for me, like I see Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris. Like I know that Zeke is better than those guys, but running back just seems to be such a low priority, like such a low need in terms of being able to field a team that's successful. So like I think Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris are good enough for what the Cowboys need. I would like to see them address another position, right? But I would be curious to hear what it is that you like about Ezekiel Elliott fitting in with the Giants.
Well, I mean, the big thing there is I think that he is a Todd Gurley level prospect. If I'm not mistaken, Gurley went 10th overall last year to the Rams. So Zeke potentially 10th to the Giants would be huge. I mean, I think specifically for the Giants, even though the Cowboys are on the clock, I think with the Giants, they have the worst tackle duo in the NFL last year. Their left and right tackle, if you look at their PFF grades, the worst combination in the NFL. So they certainly need help on the line. And I'll be fine if they draft an offensive lineman. That said, the potential to have a core of Ezekiel Elliott and Odell Beckham Jr. offensively is really dynamic. For the Cowboys specifically, I think that Zeke there, I mean, obviously they have a great offensive line. I think he could just be such a dynamic force for that offense and a reliable force. I mean, Eric Galko, I always love what he said. Sort of like the 5 tools in baseball. Ezekiel Elliott can run, he can run block, he can receive, and he can pass block. And I agree with that statement. And I think for the Cowboys, with an aging Romo, with a Dez Bryant who needs some more help on that offense, some big-time help in the skill positions to take attention away from him, I think Ezekiel Elliott could be that guy. Why do you hope they don't take him? Just that it's redundant with McFadden and Morris?
Yeah, and it's not even so much that I think it's redundant with McFadden and Morris. Like I would basically always hope that a team would just bypass that position in the top part of the draft and instead would, go defense, go offensive line, maybe even go wide receiver if they had a need, and then go running back in the 2nd or 3rd round. So, it's a situation where like I think Ezekiel Elliott is a really good running back. At the same time, like I think we always are at risk of overvaluing like the new shiny objects, but then also overvaluing our ability to gauge players, right? Like Darren McFadden at one point was like the shiny object who went in the top 5, like I think these running backs who are sort of like once in a generation running backs actually come along much more often than once in a generation.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Matt, especially for dynasty players. Next year's running back class with Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, I mean, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we got to see how big he really is and all that, but I mean, Christian McCaffrey looks like the real deal. Royce Freeman. I mean, next year's running back class, and I know I'm not even remembering everyone that I need to be remembering, but next year's running back class looks like the real deal.
Yeah, there are, at this point, it looks like 4 running backs.
Nick Chubb?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so yeah, Nick Chubb. Just forgot about him.
Yeah, 4 or 5 running backs that I would, at this point, be happy with. And, of course, like there's a long time between now and next year. Someone could get injured. Someone could be really slow at the combine, right? Like there are a lot of things that could happen. But it looks like another promising year of top-end running backs. I would expect at least 2 of those guys to turn out fairly comparable in terms of like NFL projectability to the 2 guys at the top of this class in Zeke and Derrick Henry. And I think that the 3rd and 4th guy in that group will probably be better than the 3rd and 4th guy in this group. So it's one of those things where I would just say, if you are the Dallas Cowboys, just don't take a running back in the 1st round.
All right. So Jerry Jones is on the phone. Jared Jones. He is everyone's clapping. They're excited about something. Now, presumably what I'm seeing is that it's Ramsey or Ezekiel Elliott. Nobody really mocked anyone other than those two guys. But we will see.
Tunzel. That's exactly what they need, another tackle.
Is that what they picked? Is that the pick?
No, I'm joking.
But it's so funny, man. Like, so I've got these mocks up. I've got Chris Collinsworth, Matt Miller, Todd McShay, Mike Mayock, Jason Boris, who was on the pod last year. He's the most accurate mock drafter over the last 5 years on planet Earth. And then Peter King. Like, they have one job to do, and none of them got the first 3 picks right. Like, I mean,
that's the thing.
Crazy.
It's such a crapshoot too, because there's so much like misinformation that is given out by teams because they are incentivized, kind of like through game theory to fool their potential competitors, right? So like that makes sense. I mean, it's like one of those things where it's like a diagram in a tree, and like once certain options happen, like everything changes. And so like I think it's almost like impossible to be a really good mock drafter. I think the only thing you can hope for is that you're just slightly better than the rest of the other people doing mock drafts. I think you're still on mute.
So they just made their pick. It is Ezekiel Elliott. He's got his little midriff dress shirt on so everyone can see his abs. But yeah, man, it's it's Zeke. So that is the pick. I mean, if there was any doubt before in your mind, Matt, as a dynasty player, who the number 1 pick in rookie draft should be, is there any question anymore with Zeke going to the Cowboys and that great offensive line?
No, I mean, I think he is number 1. I think no matter where he was going, he was probably number 1 because the team that was going to draft him was going to put significant capital in him. And I think he does have the pass blocking and pass receiving edge on Derrick Henry. But I mean, I just sort of like want to go punch a wall right now. Like I understand it, but it's
Matt.
like, it's the type of situation where last year was a fantastic rookie running back group, right? Like, why not just draft a 2nd or 3rd rounder last year? Like, why didn't you draft David Johnson, right? Like, there were so many people who could have been drafted with anywhere from a 2nd to a 4th round pick, right? Like, why spend the number 4 pick overall on a running back? Like, even if he is a great running back, how long is he going to be a great running back? Like, the Cowboys aren't actually all that close to being a Super Bowl contending team, like, to justify thinking that like a great running back is going to make the difference.
Now, you bring up a good point here, and you talked about last year's class. In researching this year's class, I basically came to the conclusion that last year's class, and I think you said this, is probably going to be the best running back class since about 2008.
Yeah.
It is like, it is not even funny how much better last year's running back class is than this one. Like,
yeah,
just not even close.
Yeah. And so it's the type of thing where it's sort of like, I think the 2 top guys here are just as good, maybe better than the top 2 guys last year. But after that, right, like last year's class just had so much depth. Even someone like Jeremy Langford, like going in the 4th round last year, like I look at this class and he's probably like a 2nd or a 3rd round pick this year. I just think it's a situation like Jay Ajayi, like going late. And, part of that obviously was because of the knee issue. And I got a tweet here saying like, I'm still pissed they didn't take Ajayi last year. And yeah, I'm still pissed too. It's a situation where I imagine that they could have found someone last year who would be 80%, maybe 75% of Ezekiel Elliott at like 20% of the cost. So it's frustrating considering that the league is continuing to shift away from the running back position and towards like a more pass centric formula for success. So anyway, the Cowboys do what the Cowboys do. I'm going to continue to hate them as I love them. And, hopefully Ezekiel Elliott is the best runner since Emmitt Smith or something. I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah. So we transition here to 5, where the mock drafts that I saw were Bosa, Jaylen Ramsey, Laramie Tunsil. So,
I mean, we're in this situation with the Jaguars, like, who knows what they do, right? Like, it could be offensive line, it could be defensive line. I think one of those is probably likely, but it's really hard to say with any certainty what it is likely to be. But there are definitely some good players left. Tunsil is good, Stanley's good. I wouldn't. Go ahead.
It's interesting to me too when you think about. I always think about drafts in terms of division. Pick is in, and with the Jaguars, they're going up against a Andrew Luck team a couple times a year. The Texans now with Brock Osweiler. There's been some quarterback upgrades. Mariota in Tennessee. There's been quarterback upgrades in the AFC South over the last 18 months. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them go to the defensive back side of the ball for that.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Quick aside, did you send the link to Rich Rebar?
Yes. So everyone who's hanging out right now, sorry, I just got a tweet that says it's in that like Drake album cover handwriting that says like, if you're reading this, it's too late. It says, if you don't have the first rookie pick, it's too late.
Right.
Which I think is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you're watching out there, the from picks 6 through 10, Rich Rebar will be joining us. Want to hang out with Rich. He's one of the smartest and most eloquent fast talkers I've ever met. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. We've got more guests throughout the night. It'll be a good show. Hopefully you're just you got a drink in your hand. I've got some chips here, and my girlfriend is cooking over here in the kitchen. It is my birthday and it is draft night, so it's basically the best day of the year.
It's Christmas.
It's today is better than Christmas, better than New Year's, better than everything.
Yeah.
Because maybe not New Year's, but it's a great night.
No, it is a good night. This is about as giddy as I get until Jerry Jones shoots my dog. But this is the draft is my favorite football related event. I prefer it to the Super Bowl. And you know what else I really prefer? The 30% discount that you can get to a RotoViz, like that, John, how smooth that was. The 30% discount you can get to a RotoViz pass. All you have to do is go to rotoviz.com/podcast. You get 30% off of a RotoViz pass. John, don't forget to make that plug regularly throughout the night because it's all about those subscription revenues.
Matt, like 3 people just stopped watching since you started talking. We were at 22, and then it just dropped down. So,
oh, that's really sad.
No. All right, so the Jaguars just took Jaylen Ramsey. Rich Rebar is now on the line. Zach Morris himself. Rich, what's going on? Can you hear us?
Not a surprise. He's having some technical difficulties.
That's right. We'll get him hooked up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
just got to turn this camera on, guys. It's fired up.
Oh, turn the camera on. We get to see. Yes.
Oh, that's
gentlemen.
That's a nice RotoViz hoodie you got there.
Hey, listen, I see you got the red on, but listen, you ain't a good fella. You ain't a good fella unless you got that RotoViz gray. They're the originals.
They're the OG.
Hold up.
Oh, he's going to get his.
Yeah, man, the gray ones are where it was at.
Yeah, no, the gray one, I've worn that way too much. Because like I work at home, like I don't leave the house. Basically, I'm just wearing hoodies all day.
Just
Oh, there you
And
go.
it's cold. It's cold where you are.
Yeah.
With my hoodie right here.
Nice. That is nice.
Yeah, RotoViz. I got a little fantasy insiders for you, a little fake football. We're just gonna pimp all the places I used to work for.
All right, hey Rich, any thoughts on the draft so far?
I mean, pretty much is gone like we expected. I mean, flip Ramsey and Bosa, and it's basically kind of chalky with what we thought. I mean, we all kind of listen. We could play our GM hats and clown the Elliott pick for all we want, but this is a fantasy football hangout, and for fantasy football, I mean, this is as good as it gets for Ezekiel Elliott's prospects. He's going to be probably a cemented top 5 to 8 redraft pick at the running back position. I mean, you look at the Cowboys last year. They trailed in the second half for 2/3 of their plays. They trailed for almost all their fourth quarter plays. They were 18th in rushing attempts, and they still were a top 10 rushing team in yards per carry. That was with Darren McFadden, Joseph Randall, and RIP, pour one out for my guy, Sir Lancelot. So, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott's run into a prime spot, and they're going to get Romo back. Dez is back healthy. I mean, it's a great spot for Ezekiel Elliott. And they don't really have any other receivers, so he's going to catch a bunch of passes like DeMarco Murray did. So, I mean, like I said, we could clown the pick from an analytic perspective and how dumb it was, because Ramsey and running back in rounds 2, 3, 5, 6 was a better combination. But I mean, for fantasy football, this is as good as it gets for us. It's where we wanted Elliott to go as fantasy football fans.
All right, guys, and I'd be remiss if I didn't flash this little baby up here. So I want you to just go ahead and soak this in. All right.
Boom.
Soak the Ezekiel Elliott draft card in.
Yep.
Total dominator. Matt, all right, before you leave, because I know you got to run, non-QB DR, Ezekiel Elliott as a first-round pick up there, high 70 percentile. Help us understand, as the creator of that metric, how good is that compared to historical first-round picks?
It's good. It's higher. No question about that. And his market share of total offense is also higher than the typical first-round running back. He's also a better receiver than you see out of a lot of first-round running backs. He's younger than you see. At the same time, you would sort of expect him to be superior in those metrics because he did go number 4 overall. You know what I mean? So, but he is a fantastic athlete. There's absolutely no question about that. It's just, again, the question of whether that is too early to take a player at a position that seems to be devalued across the league. I don't know if Jeff Fisher were lacking a running back and he had the number 4 pick, if he would take Ezekiel Elliott. He probably would. But it's a situation where there's no question, he is a fantastic prospect. It's just whether it's actually a valuable position that he plays.
Hey, Rich, what do you think about those comps, especially the Gurley one?
Yeah, I like him. I mean, Gurley was the guy he kind of matched up with the most. I wish we'd got some measurables from Gurley last year, but I think we all think that they would have been really good. I mean, that's kind of where he fits. I mean, big guys that run fast. I mean, guys 225 pounds that run sub 4 or 5 40s. I mean, it's hard not to like those guys, especially when they get invested with draft capital like this.
Yeah, you got to be geeked if you have the first pick in a rookie draft.
Yeah, it's in the bag right now. I mean, he already had such a safe floor with high upside, so.
All right, so we've got. Go ahead, Rich.
I was gonna say, let me ask you guys a question since we blew through the Ravens here. I wanted to get these Brashad Perriman hot takes, man. Of where would you guys have had Perriman in this class of receivers? If he was available this year instead of last.
I think top 4. I think it probably would have still been Coleman and then Carew, but I think you could have had a good argument about Perriman and Treadwell, Perriman and Doxson. Matt, what do you think?
I would have had him obviously behind Coleman. I think I would have had him behind Treadwell. I think it would have been behind Doxson. So I think Will Fuller and Leonte Carew are kind of the point where it becomes more of a debate for me. But Carew, I think in a draft agnostic sense, is just so superior in every way except the fact that he's not as fast. But, I mean, Carew was just a fantastic producer. I think I probably would have Carew ahead of him, too. So maybe he would be, like, number 5 for me, which is basically, like, where he was last year for me. What happened here with the Ravens?
The pick is in. I haven't seen it yet. As far as mock drafts, I've seen there were 3 for Laramie Tunsil, Miles Jack in one, and then Joey Bosa in the other 2. So, I mean, it's probably an upset to some extent right now that Ronnie Stanley and Laramie Tunsil are both on the board. Goodell's walking to the podium right now.
I'm going to say Buckner.
Everyone had Buckner to the Niners, so this would be an upset.
Yo, the Ravens are old as shit, man. I mean, their team is super old. Oh, all right.
So we get an offensive lineman upgrade for the Rams, or excuse me, for the Ravens.
Who was it, Tunsil?
No, it was Ronnie Stanley. So Tunsil here goes from looking like maybe being the first overall pick in the draft, and now he's still on the board at 7.
Were you guys on Twitter during this time at all? Someone sabotaged Tunsil, man.
What happened?
Someone, whoever we was buddies with in college, tweeted out a video of him just getting high in this gas mask right before the draft. It had to be an old video from dudes in like a dorm room and stuff because he's there. Obviously, he's at the draft. But yeah, obviously, it's been floating around. So I mean, maybe it didn't help him. I mean, there were already rumors that Stanley was going to go ahead of him anyway, so it may not affect anything. But just pretty ironic.
All right, so real quick, I'm going to do a quick screen share here, and we're going to get this Ravens depth chart up. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yeah.
From our lads there? Yeah, dude, they're old as shit, man. Look at their roster, dude. They got a 37-year-old receiver off an Achilles tear. Justin Forsette's 31. Their best pass rushers are Suggs and Doomerville. They're 33 and 34. Ladarius Webb is 30. Mike Wallace is 30. This team is old as shit, and they were bad last year. I know a lot of people will say that they were bad because of the injuries they had. I mean, they put a ton of guys on IR last year. And it was the first losing season they had under John Harbaugh. But, I mean, it's hard to really – does anyone think that they're even going to win the division? Like, they're not going to be a playoff team this year, and they're old, man.
No, I'm just trying to wait out Justin Forsett so eventually I can get Buck Allen in there.
Are you a big you guys are big Buck Allen guys?
I like him enough. Big, fast, good receiver. Like, there's really not much more. There's really not much more I want from a guy that you ended up getting last year, like in the second round of a rookie draft. I think all he needs is just some opportunity, and hopefully, Justin Forsett can kind of decease from a fantasy perspective, and Buck Allen can get his chance there.
It almost seems to me like, how in baseball, for example, like you get teams like the Rays or the Athletics who do sort of like guys who are excellent in niches, and they're willing to try to exploit some market inefficiencies and so on and so forth. It almost seems like the Ravens are trying to do that to an extent with football. And it's risky. I mean, last year I think the injury thing definitely backfired on them. But I mean, they're kind of walking that line of a lot of young players that they're counting on, and then a lot of veterans on their last legs that they really need to hang tough in order for this season to hit. I mean, they could be drafting up here in the top 6-7 picks again next year.
Yeah, they're a disaster to try to project. I was talking to Matt with this a little bit last night when we got off the air. I mean, you can plug them into the projection machine. I mean, they just have a gaggle of guys at every spot. I mean, just try to divvy up what they're going to do in that backfield, what they're going to do at tight end. I mean, you've got Crockett Gilmore, Dennis Pitta, those dudes have one arm and one leg combined. Max Williams is on year 2. Ben Watson is 36. Darren Waller's moving to tight end. Then you've got Perriman coming back who hasn't played. Mike Wallace has 100 yards receiving in 8 of his past 76 games played. Steve Smith's 37 off of Achilles. Campanero's coming back. Who knows what the ghost of Marlon Brown's going to do. It's just a gaggle of guys that you're just trying. It's a nightmare to project when we talk about that backfield. How do you project? I mean, Forsett, Forsette's one of the worst receiving backs in the history of the NFL. I mean, he's 7th worst all time with backs over 150 catches. And but you look at Buck Allen, like it could just be a 1-2 punch because Buck Allen was such a bad runner last year. I mean, those 6 games and Forsett was out, 70% of his PPR output was just from receiving. So, I mean, it's going to be just a nightmare to project these guys. It's going to be a nightmare of an offense to try to hit on.
Now, Rich, let me just stop you there because you didn't mention a very key player in their rotation. Trent Richardson.
Oh, Terrence West and Trent Richardson. They've got all the old Browns running backs. We'll load up on them.
This, like, to me, this just looks like it's. I mean, like, gaggle is the word you use. It's a gaggle of Jags. It's a jaggle.
A jaggle.
It's
wow.
a jaggle.
Wow. All right, Rich. The Niners are on the board. Apparently, the pick is in. Just give me like 5,000 feet from the Niners. Universally, it looks like this pick is probably going to be DeForest Buckner out of Oregon, going back, being reunited with Chip Kelly. But talk to me about the Niners real quick.
Yeah, I mean, they need everything, but this is just falling into the same thing what they've done. All they've done is draft defensive players for the past 5 years with high capital. I mean, you look at the first 3 rounds over the past 5 years, they've drafted 7 offensive players, and they've all been just completely horrible. I mean, it's been Carlos Hyde, Kaepernick, Vance McDonald, A.J. Jenkins, LaMichael James, Marcus Martin, and Brandon Thomas. Those are the offensive players they've drafted in the first 3 rounds out of 17, capable picks. So, I mean, I'm fine with taking best player available from like a fan stance because they just need so much. And this is kind of early, I guess, to reach for a skill player like a receiver. And they're probably not going to take a quarterback here. So, I mean, they're just basically going best player available. But they got to find a way to score points, man. The 49ers aren't going to start winning games until they score points. They were 32nd in points scored last year, 32nd in points per drive, 31st in yards per drive. That'd be fine if they weren't 29th on defense in yards allowed, too. So, I mean, that's why I thought they hired Chip Kelly, was to just bring something to what was been just a dreadful offense, even when Harbaugh was there. That basically just got by and eking out games and not making mistakes. So I mean, they just had an unfortunate draft slot I think this year to really infuse offensive talent where they are without reaching. I mean, the trading back would have been ideal, but they need bodies on offense. Maybe you look at the top of round 2, they can go receiver. If a guy like Will Fuller slides through, or Leonte Carew is there at the top of the round, they could jump ahead of the Giants and get cut in on that second coming of Hakeem Nicks, so they can't replace him. So I mean, maybe that's what they're looking to do at the top of the second round. But they need guys that can help on offense immediately.
I mean, is it too obvious for them to draft Buckner here? I almost feel like it's a jinx that all 6 of these guys.
No, they could take. I could see them taking Tunsil. I mean, Trent Brown played pretty decently at right tackle. Their offensive line is terrible. I mean, they allowed the 2nd most sacks in the NFL last year, and that didn't even matter what quarterback. Basically, Gabbert and Kaepernick both had the same amount of sack rate, just about. So I mean, they just need help everywhere. It sucks, man. They suck. They're a bad team. Is
Kaepernick still their quarterback on Monday? Was Kaepernick still on the roster on Monday?
I mean, I don't see how they repair the situation based on how far it's gotten, through the public eye. So, I mean, it's got to be tenfold behind closed doors if it's this far ahead of, in our eyes. So, I mean, I don't really see how he is. But like I said, Chip can buy himself a year if he just rolls with Kaepernick, and they can blame Kaepernick for everything. So, I mean, he can kind of buy himself a year.
Yeah. Picks in. DeForest Buckner.
Yeah.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk, man.
Yep. Yeah, we can talk about the 49ers a little bit more, though, because, I mean, I think Carlos Hyde's an interesting guy. He's starting to pick up steam. Let
me get up the Niners depth chart here on the screen share so that we can all be looking up there.
Hey, fellas.
Matt, you going to run?
Yeah, I'm going to peace out, but I will be back at the end of the show to close it out with Scott Smith.
Yeah.
And
hey Matt, if you want to, if anyone wants to contribute to the Matt Friedman Beard Trimmer Fund, go to rotoviz.com/podcast and subscribe to the site there. Thanks for your time.
Milk was a bad choice.
This is pure laziness. All right, thanks guys. Yeah, milk was a bad choice. So was Ezekiel Elliott.
All right, Rich, you got my screen share on here.
Yeah, I got it, man.
With the Niners.
That's a lot of fire on that.
All right, so let's talk about. Yeah. Let's talk about up here. Hopefully you can see me highlighting that. At the wide receiver, because that's Chip Kelly. He drafted, 3-4 wide receivers when he was in Philly with top 3, round 4 picks, something like that. So I look at it, and I'm thinking Quentin Patton, Torrey Smith, Bruce Ellington. I know some people like DeAndre Smelter. What is going on with their pass catchers? Because even down at the tight end position, they've spent a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick on tight ends, and we don't know what is what there. Like, just help me out, man.
I mean,
whoa! Browns traded their pick.
Oh, nice. Browns are working it, man.
Yeah, good for them. All right, sorry. Go ahead with the 49ers.
Yeah, man. I wish I could tell you, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of bad. I mean, Quentin Patton's been bad for 3 years now. I mean, he's his third year. I think he's got 36 career catches. Bruce Ellington really hasn't been able to stay healthy and get on the field on offense. Jerome Simpson and Flipper Anderson's son, they're pretty much done. You can just basically count them out. They probably won't be on the roster. Smelter's interesting, but he's still a 25-year-old guy that's yet to catch a pass in the NFL. Eric Rodgers, I guess, is kind of interesting a little bit. I mean, from an athletic standpoint, those guys have a little bit of athleticism, so maybe they can find their way in the field. But I still think they're gonna get guys that are gonna bully some of these guys out of the depth chart here. And tight end, who the hell knows?
So the pick was traded to the Titans. So I mean, Peter King kind of called this, that the Titans would jump back up and try to get their guy. I mean, with Stanley off the board, I mean, you got to think that it's Tunsil here, right? I mean,
yeah, I would think so. I mean, but still, though, I mean, even if they take Tunsil, and I get it, the kind of prospect is that, I mean, you're still using 3 of your last 4 first-round draft picks that are top 12 picks on offensive linemen, because they took Warmack, they took Luan, and they took Mariota, and now if they take Tunsil. So, I mean, I hate taking preventers this early in the draft and loading up on this many preventers. I want guys that are creators for my team.
Yeah, you want to go on the offensive.
I mean, and you can count edge rushers as creators, in my mind, or But I mean, to invest that much capital in offense. I mean, the Cowboys did it with picks, that were kind of scattershot. They traded in for Frederick in the late 20s. But you're talking about high capital draft picks the Titans have put into their offensive line now over the last 4 years. It's still a pretty suspect defense. They still don't have playmakers at the receiver position, really. I mean, Kendall Wright's in last year's contract. But all these teams at the top, like I said, I mean, at the top of the second round is where we might see that wave of receivers go that we really want. I don't know if we'll quite see it tonight, but I think that's the hot spot, is that round 2, because everyone needed running backs at the top of the draft, but it was too early for them to reach for them our receivers. That is, but it was too early for them to kind of pull that trigger. So I mean, that's the hot spot I'm looking at. But I mean, if you're gonna run exotic smash mouth, you've got to load up on linemen.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too is they they're gonna run that wing tee high school style, like Paxton Lynch ran in high school. I mean, the thing is too, and the picks coming in right now, is there was talk that if they stayed at 15, that maybe they take someone like a Treadwell, like a Doxson, something like that. And I mean, that makes sense in that range. For this to be an offensive skill position player would be pretty shocking at 8, I think. And here Goodell goes. Jack Conklin.
Oh, Conklin. So the weed videos the weed video is having an effect.
Wow, that's why you don't let your friends record you smoking drugs or snorting or doing anything, because
this is why you can. Wow. This is why we can't have rock stars anymore, man. This is
why we can't have nice things, Rich.
You can't even be a rock star and do some cool ass shit on the road anymore. I mean, this is what happens, man.
So
I don't really have a Jack Conklin take. Just to let you know, I have no Jack Conklin takes.
I don't either. I mean, of the mock drafts, McShay and Mayock had him at 10 to the Giants.
It's a good deal for the Browns, man. Browns got 20.
Go ahead. What was the pick deal? I didn't see that.
Well, they got 15, and then they got a 2017 second, and then they got a third this year. So the Browns are just accumulating picks, man. And that's what you do. They scorch the earth. I mean, they scorched the earth on that franchise this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was really interesting going back a couple years. I want to say that Fantasy Douche had some articles about the Seahawks and the Patriots. and essentially outlining that those two teams aren't better than anyone at drafting. They just had more picks and then were better at quickly weeding through those guys and figuring out who was worth keeping around and who was not. And so the Browns now, with the new DePodesta regime, I mean, I think if the Browns are really bought in on analytics, I think that you got to look at this and say that they are telling the world that they think that picks are more important than premium players, right? That there's a surplus of talent.
Well, they're doing it right too, because not only are they acquiring picks, they're acquiring picks in the first 3 rounds. You know, they pick up that 3rd rounder. They pick up a 2017 second. They picked up picks from the Eagles this year. So now they're going to have 15, 32, 65, 76, 77, 99, 100 this year in this draft. So not only are they just acquiring picks, because we know the 4th round and beyond is basically a wasteland for all teams. I mean, there really have been like no real like giant successful franchise changing hits in that area of the draft, except for Richard Sherman, you know, over the past 5 years, really. But they're acquiring picks in the first 3 rounds. These are premium capital picks where you're going to get, and you know, you're going to hit on some of these guys. And this is where you want a buckshot in the first 3 rounds. You just don't want a buckshot in totality like the 49ers have, or even the Seahawks have the last couple of years. I mean, the Seahawks have made a ton of picks, but they've come later in the draft. They've only made 2 first-round picks in the last. They haven't made a first-round pick since 2012. So, I mean, this is what you want to do. You want to acquire premium picks, not just acquire picks, but acquire premium capital picks to throw at the wall. And that's what the Browns are doing, man. Like I said, this is a team that's a team that needs everything, a franchise that needs everything. So they're going to run into some playmakers by default, you know, hopefully. I mean, yeah, they're doing it right. I mean, I think whether this works or not, I think that this is a great plan for the Browns. I know if you're a Browns fan, you're sick. They traded out of 2 spots. You wanted players for them, but you need a lot of players, and you're looking to have multiple hits at having franchise difference-making players, and that's how you're going to do it.
Definitely. So I want to give a shout-out to, Kent, Justin Woodruff, Vincenzo, who's watching and tweeting at us. We had a couple questions, and it looks like the Bucs are almost certainly going to go defense here at pick 9, so there probably won't be as much to talk about. But got a question from Justin Woodruff. Said, where do we want Corey Coleman to go for dynasty purposes? Where could he land that would bump him up to maybe the number 2 pick in your mind?
I mean, I like the Bengals. I don't know if he'll get there, because I mean, I want my guys to get on teams with good quarterbacks ASAP and good offenses, period. I mean, he would have AJ Green and Eifert and to draw attention away from him. He could just make splash plays. I mean, it's a really good offense for him to be a part of. So I mean, I think that's the ideal spot. I would say off the top of my head, but I don't think he's going to last that long. I mean, maybe a spot like Houston, but we saw they're willing to be a low volume team, you know, when they got right last year. So I mean, I don't really love that spot. You know, we want Nuke Hopkins to suck up as much target volume as possible if it's going to be low volume. So I mean, I would say Cincinnati. Washington's not a bad spot if you want to wait a year. You might not get a lot of immediate impact. Tangible 2016 production, but you know, Garcon's a free agent, Djack's a free agent. He would run into a lot of volume in the future, and he still might be able to play over a guy like Garcon, who's been kind of bad the last few years. So those are spots off the top of my head that I'm thinking about. But I mean, where you got?
Wow. So hey, the Bears are on the board. They traded up 2 spots from 11 to 9. So that means that they were afraid the Giants were going to take their guy. I mean, based on what I've seen, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean the Giants were going to take their guy, but based on what I've seen in the mock drafts, Ronnie Stanley, Shaq Lawson, Vernon Hargraves are really the main people that were mocked to them. Guys who are falling would be Miles Jack, Laramie Tunsil, maybe Josh Doxson. I saw him mocked at 8 by Todd McShay. You know, maybe there's a Leonard Floyd in play. So there's a lot of different directions that we could go here. Justin, thanks for the question. Vincenzo, we'll get to you in a second once this comes down.
I mean, this has got to be. I mean, John Fox. They're trading up for defense, man. Unless it's a tackle, unless offensive line. But I mean, the weed video seems to be having an effect. Unless they just said they said screw it, we're just gonna go get him. Because they probably just, you know, put in context like, hey, this dude is in a college dorm room and some dude videotaped him. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, letting the rational thought play out over here. But yeah, I mean, that's all I can see is like someone like, pass rusher, Hargraves, Tunsil. That's really all we're looking at here.
All right, so picks coming in. We can talk a little bit more about Corey Coleman. I agree that Cincinnati is probably the primo spot for him to land. But let's see what Goodell has to say here. Well, they're doing a little bit of a tribute here. The one thing I'll say, too, is that I think in the early 20s is where a lot of the fantasy stuff is going to happen, that being with the Texans at 22, Redskins 21, Vikings 23, Bengals 24. A lot of wide receivers and other players mocked in that range. Even the Jets at 20, maybe Paxton Lynch goes there. But I think if you look at the Vikings, for example, I mean, maybe with them going back indoors this year, maybe that's a chance for them to try to really reestablish themselves as a vertical threat team. I was on the Norse Code pod, and we were talking about how the Vikings over the last couple of years have as much as 120-plus yard pass play per game compared to other people in their division, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over a 2-year stretch to be giving up that many big plays on average is a big deal. And so that could be a potential spot. But I mean, I also kind of think about the Vikings as an intermediate passing team, physical blocker potential at the wide receiver spot. I mean, Treadwell, if he was still on the board, I think would make a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, is he actually going to pick this player? Maybe.
You watching on ESPN or NFL?
I got an NFL Network on mute up here.
Me too.
The pick is in, but they're not going to tell us. But yeah, I mean, just hashing off your Vikings point, like, why not just swerve into Teddy Bridgewater's strengths? Like, why keep trying to like force a field stretcher in there? Like, why not get a guy like Treadwell or Coleman, a guy that can is a good intermediate player that can turn short catch receptions into long receptions instead of trying to make Teddy Bridgewater something he really isn't. Just swerve into your main player strengths. I mean. But they're still probably a year away from opening that offense up because Zimmer hates everything and is willing to just grind out Adrian Peterson until his career, kind of comes to an end here. Geez, will they bring out the whole 85 Bears to come make this pick? These are all the kids from the 85 Bears team?
Is that what this is? Jeez.
No, I don't know.
I don't know what it is either. Half paying attention. I'm saying I have a new level of respect for anyone who does like live TV and has to juggle all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably be a little bit quiet on the fantasy dynasty kind of stuff for a few more picks, but I have a feeling that when it comes, it's going to come in a big run.
Yeah, when you said pick 6 through 10, I said, "Damn, we're gonna be talking about some." We're going to be talking about some things that aren't fantasy relevant.
But, I wanted to I asked you for this range because of the Niners and the Browns. I tried to pick people who would be, good for that pick range. All right, so it's Leonard Floyd.
And it's a terrible pick because that dude's like 30.
Is he?
He's 24 years old already.
Oh, wow. And he's still a tweener? 24
Yep.
years old and is a rookie, doesn't know he's going to play. Thank God the Giants didn't draft him.
I don't know. I don't know much about him as a player. I completely scout these guys from a fantasy standpoint, so I'm only looking at running backs, receivers, tight ends. But I know that he's old.
Yeah.
He's got wild get off. That's all that really matters, I guess.
Yeah.
And Ben's like Gumby. I want to write these things like Ben's like Gumby. Wow, get off. Like we come up with some of this stuff.
All right, let's come up with some fun euphemisms. Yeah, he turns basically on opening weekend of this NFL season. Floyd will be 24.
Woo.
That's kind of Jarvis Jones. That's the same thing that Jarvis Jones had going. He was a top 15 pick a couple years ago to the Steelers.
Yeah, I never really heard much about Leonard Floyd until like the last week and a half when he started surging from the scouting community. He wasn't a guy that I really had any kind of pulse on. But like I said, I'm not really investing heavily into scouting any defensive players. I give mad props to the dudes that can do this, the Josh Norris of the world, and these draft nicks that can watch 350 players and come up with stuff for all these guys. I mean, like us, like I ran like 150 players through like a player model, like, and that was like, and I watched some of them, on like YouTube and like Noon Kick.
All right, so the Giants.
Yeah, this is your squad, man. I mean, what are they gonna do? This is your birthday. Happy birthday, by the way. What are they gonna deliver you a birthday present, or?
They should have let me make the pick.
Who would you pick?
Well, I mean, honestly, they've got the worst offensive tackle duo in the league.
Well, the right side of their line is trash.
Yeah, but I mean, I saw Jack Conklin mocked here. I saw Leonard Floyd mocked here. Those guys are off the board. Tunsil is really the guy still remaining. And then I saw Miles Jack and a Corey Coleman. So, I mean, for me, I think it's got to be line. I know that, for example, Kevin Cole in his opportunity scores said that the Giants would be, I think, the most favorable landing spot for a rookie wide receiver. I don't know if the value matches up right here. If it is somebody, I think I would probably err on the side of it being Treadwell. The Giants, with their first-round picks, do seem to value age. I don't think anyone that they've drafted maybe in the last 8 years in the first round, something like that, has been older than 21 and a half in their final college season. So, but then again, on the back end, they seem to go for some barbell kind of guys, like who are 23, 24-year-old types of rookies. So it seems like early, young, late, older, and see what happens.
They've been just an awful drafting team under Jerry Reese, especially with early capital. I mean, David Wilson really isn't his fault, and Weston Richburg and Odell was a good pick. But I mean, Amukamara, Jernigan, Marvin Austin, Ruben Randall, Demontre Moore, Jaron Hosley. Those guys are all picks in the top 100 they've made that gave them absolutely zilch, man, just about.
It sounds like I don't know. I think I'm looking at Rappaport here. I get these guys all mixed up. I think they were saying that Tunsil was off a lot of teams' draft boards. I don't know if that was because of the incident with his dad that he had, or stepdad, or whatever that was early in the season. I don't know if it's the weed thing that you're talking about, Rich. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy because it only takes one team with these guys. It's like with Miles Jack.
Will jump eventually, man.
Yeah,
this isn't even like a real big thing. Like a dude in a dorm room, like
no,
that thing could have been 3 years ago for all we know. Like,
yeah, but it's crazy that one set of team doctors can say we're comfortable with this injury. Another set of team doctors can say we're not comfortable with this injury, and that that makes a difference, particularly for Miles Jack going top 5 or going 25 overall, something like that. It's crazy, the range of outcomes, and just how like a fine-tooth comb that this is.
So we kind of got an idea of the Giants. Say they don't take a skill player here. We know that they're going to need some skill players. They're going to need some running backs. They're going to need some receivers. I mean, you got your eye on any guys in the subsequent rounds that you're hoping that they pull a trigger on?
I mean, I'm a big Carew guy, so I'd love to see Carew at So Kent just tweeted at us and said Rap Sheet said Tunsil is off some teams' boards outright. So that could be who was it last year? Lyle Collins out of LSU.
Yeah,
that was supposed to go in the top 10 and then went completely undrafted and signed with the Cowboys. I mean, heck, that's another like first round offensive lineman that the Cowboys got recently. But subsequent rounds, I mean, I think if you're looking at the second round, Tyler Boyd would be in play, Leonte Carew would be in play in that kind of space. Later, I mean, it's tough to say. But I mean, I think counting on Victor Cruz is probably a mistake. And I don't really think that they are doing that. So I do think that they do need to go after someone here. I mean, what do you think would be the best complement stylistically to Beckham?
I think a guy like Doxson, a guy that can like really excel at playing flanker. Because if I don't know if you're like you said, you can count on Cruz. Cruz gives you anything; he's going to give it to you out of the slot. While
Right.
Odell Beckham's your move player. So I think you're looking at a guy that's a good flanker that can run nines and slants and posts is what you're looking at. A guy like Will Fuller at the second round would be great for the Giants
Eli
too, I think.
Apple. Wow. I mean, at least they stuck with their young approach with top prospects, but man. And how about Urban Meyer? Urban Meyer is somewhere like I got 3 in the top 10. He's gonna have a lot more through the night.
Yeah, I mean, Darron Lee's gonna get drafted in the first round here for sure.
Yep.
Decker's gonna get drafted in the first round. For sure.
Maybe Braxton. Who else are we thinking about?
So, cycling
Hey
back
Andrew,
on the
what's
Giants.
going on? I want to welcome on our next guest. Andrew, how's it going?
I see him.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah. There's a little bit of a lag there, but we're all good. Welcome in. Coming to us from Louisiana, correct?
Yes, New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Oh, nice.
Good deal. We got the Saints on the clock here in a couple picks, so we'll look forward to getting into that. Rich, you were kind of saying something there. I apologize.
I was just gonna get you with one last Giants take before I roll out too, then, because I saw you tweeting about Ezekiel Elliott earlier. Obviously, I mean the Giants have quite a swarm of running backs. They only rushed for 100 yards as a team 4 times last year. That was second last in the NFL. What kind of running backs are you looking for that, if any? Or are you content with them rolling in with Jennings, Vereen, Bobby Rainey, Orleans Darkwa?
No, I'm not content with that, but I look at it and I don't know what they want, because they've got Jennings, who's a little bit of a bigger guy, who can catch some passes. They've got Andre Williams, who is more of that like short yardage kind of back. Vereen, obviously the pass guy. They've got parts of guys everywhere, but it's like which of them do they want to just deploy? So let's just say that McAdoo wants to go with someone maybe closer to the Vereen mold. There's a guy, Wendell Smallwood, a little bit later in the draft, maybe a round 3, round 4 kind of guy that I like out of West Virginia. If we're looking at round 2, I mean, I'm a big fan of Kenneth Dixon, but I think that probably in some ways he's similar to Rashad Jennings. I mean, later, I'm a big Tyler Ervin fan. You want to talk about round 4, round 5 as a guy that is going to be kind of a do-it-all jitterbug. But yeah, I just don't know what they want because they rotate these guys so much that it's hard to really pin down what they're looking for because they've got everything, but they're using nothing.
Yeah, they couldn't figure it out at all last year. Rashad Jennings came on that final quarter when they finally settled in on him. But we've seen Rashad Jennings do this to us before, where he has like an awesome spout of like 4 to 5 weeks, and we all buy in, and then get nothing out of it. So, yeah, nice. I appreciate it though. But I do want to say happy birthday to you again, man. Listen, if the fantasy community was going to remake the movie world, you would be number 1 to replace Daniel Craig, man. You'd be the new James Bond. We'd fire you in. So.
Thanks, man.
So yeah,
Thanks.
man, I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys lock it in. I hope, man, Andrew, I hope you get some fantasy players come off the board here.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, man. I saw Elliott go, and I'm great about that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, hey, you guys have a good night. We'll definitely be reaching out. Everyone knows where to find me. So definitely, you guys have a good one.
All right, take it easy, Rich. Appreciate you joining us. Everyone, follow him on Twitter at Lord Reeves if you're not already doing that, and we will catch up with you soon, brother.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll bring in Andrew here in just a second. Before we do that, I want to remind everyone that if you want a 30% discount to RotoViz, same content, all that, but at a discount, rotoviz.com/podcast is where you can find that. So we welcome in Andrew Scherer coming to us from Louisiana. I know we're still a pick away here, but we've got another NFC South team on the board. when you're looking at the Bucs right here, what are your thoughts on what the Bucs could use here at the 11th pick?
If I had to pick for the Bucs, I think Hargraves makes sense. I saw Apple go right when I got on with y'all. That's shocking to me to see Apple go ahead of Hargraves. I know Apple's a little bit better of a man-to-man guy than Hargraves is, but Bucs need a cornerback, and I think it's got to be Hargraves. I actually I like William Jackson a lot. He's not mocked until further down, but from the Bucs, they need cornerback help, man. I think Jonathan Banks didn't pan out for them. They got Brent Grimes in the offseason, but that's about it for them, a cornerback. I think that's what they need.
Yeah, and I mean that's I think probably they were sitting there at 9 with the sense that the Bears were trading up for not a cornerback. And they thought, okay, well, if Apple and Hargraves, one of those guys has to be there at 11.
Exactly.
The mocks that I saw really had Hargraves, Leonard Floyd, and Sheldon Rankins, and that was it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Hargraves going to Tampa Bay at 9, and them falling back to 11 I guess it just makes sense. They didn't even get a big return. I think all they got is a 4th-round pick. As long as flipping it. And this Laramie Tunsil news is stealing the show. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. So what's your read on that, being down from SEC country?
I followed Tunsil. I thought Tunsil was going to be number 1 pick. As of late, I follow a lot of Matt Miller. I follow a lot of draft guys. They all called Ronnie Stanley going 3rd overall to San Diego, which I personally think would have been a better pick for San Diego. But, man, we all have Twitter. We're all on that. And just to see this stuff unfold with Tunsil and the marijuana, he's Lel Collins this year. Maybe not as worse as a situation, but look, teams see that and they're not going to take him. I mean, Baltimore needed an offensive lineman, and one thing that Baltimore doesn't put up with is off the field stuff. So he was going to slip past that. So Tunsil's in some. I don't even know if he gets picked tonight, man. I don't know where to go with that.
All right, and so Hargraves is off the board, and he of course is like Snapchatting it or Instagramming it or doing something millennial with it. He can't just be there. He's got to snap it. But
you have to. It's the way to go.
Whatever. So I mean that's pretty chalky.
Yeah. Look, I need to find out what happened. I'm so curious to know how that gets out on the biggest night of your life. I read something that it was I'm so serious with you. I read something that it was blackmail. It's like, what? How does that even happen? I can't believe it.
Yeah. All right, so we're down to the Saints. Now I've seen I have these mock drafts from Chris Collinsworth, Matt Miller, McShay, Mayock, Jason Boris, Peter King, and kind of reading across the board here. We for the Saints, who they had Mackenzie Alexander, Paxton Lynch, Sheldon Rankins 4 times. Sheldon Rankins 4 times.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the Saints, man. What's kind of the state of the Saints?
I can start it off with saying the state of the Saints is defensive problems. The defensive problems are across the board. Last year we saw a lot of problems in the secondary. Keenan Lewis was our best cornerback. He goes down with an injury. His first injury-plagued season of his career. You got Jerry Spurd, free safety. He's going through some injury problems. You see Delvin Breaux step up big last year for the Saints, so that was good to see. But, the thing about the Saints is they had their secondary problems, but I think more of that was problems with the line. This year we're looking at Nick Fairley. You're looking at Fairley, Cam Jordan have a job right now. Dennis Allen's defensive coordinator. He's ran a 4-3 his entire career, being defensive coordinators in Oakland, and I believe he was in Denver as well. But he's always run a 4-3, so I don't think that's going to change. Haloi Kakaha was a linebacker last year. He was a second-round pick last year. Very good off the edge. He's quick. Last year he played a little bit more linebacker. He dropped off into coverage. He struggled in coverage mightily. So I think with the news of Fairley, it opens up a spot for Kakaha. I think they're going to move Kakaha to the jack position. They're going to move him on the edge. So essentially, if they're going Kakaha on the edge, which I think they are, it's going to be Cam Jordan, Kakaha, and Nick Fairley. They both have jobs, or they all have jobs, excuse me. So I think that leaves us vulnerable to where we need a defensive tackle, and that's where I think Sheldon Rankins comes into play. I've seen mocks having him as low as the 25th overall best player, and I've seen him as high as 10th overall best. Rankins, he's not incredibly huge for defensive tackle in the NFL, but he's quick. He's very good on the interior, and I think if he can get pressure on the quarterback, if he can play out like we think he can, I think him and Fairley, Fairley's been a little overrated, I think, but I think if him and Fairley can provide good pressure on the inside, along with Cam Jordan on the end, maybe Kakaha every now and then, I think they can take some pressure off the secondary. I think getting pressure on the quarterback would be huge for us. Keenan, you have to assume Keenan Lewis is going to be healthy. You got to assume Delvin Breaux is going to play up to his potential. If that's the case, then I think they can survive with possibly getting a cornerback second to third round. So I'm thinking Sheldon Rankins here. Just essentially, I think the line's too bad, and they need somebody on the line.
So a couple questions then. Let me ask you about the notion that Paxton Lynch could potentially be in play here. Let me ask you that, and then because you're kind of down there, not too far from Memphis in the grand scheme of things. And then tell me about also the addition of Coby Fleener. No L, I forget that all the time. And what you think about Fleener in that offense.
Okay, well, I'll start off with Paxton Lynch. I can tell you that being a Saints fan, I do my best to just see things how they are. Not be too biased for the Saints. But I can tell you this right now: if Paxton Lynch goes to the Saints, I'm gonna have a huge problem. You'll probably see some facial expressions from me. I think it would be the dumbest thing the Saints could do right now. With all the holes we have on defense, there are several things that they need to go over a quarterback. You draft Garrett Grayson last year in the third round, which, no problem. You drafted Grayson in the third round to be someone to sit behind Drew Brees. That's fine. It's been a year. You can't spend a third-round draft pick on somebody and then just replace them with Paxton Lynch. They just signed Luke McCown to a contract. So essentially they have three quarterbacks on the roster. I don't see a point in them drafting Paxton Lynch right now. You're putting four quarterbacks on the roster. All four of them would be under contract. It makes zero sense here. The QB of the future thing, I get it. I'm a fan of it. That's why I enjoyed the pick of Grayson last year. I was a huge supporter of it. I loved it. So I think Paxton Lynch would be a pointless pick here. I think the Saints would be making a huge mistake, and it would really make me want to leave the room and shut my laptop down and call it a night, because it would just make no sense. You have plenty holes that they need to fill.
Yep.
If you want me to carry on to Coby Fleener, I can kind of tie it in.
Jump into Fleener real quick, because that's somebody who kind of was sharing that role with Dwayne Allen in Indianapolis. Josh Hill kind of looked like he might become a thing, and then really wasn't with Benjamin Watson, leading the tight end position last year. So what's up with Fleener?
Fantasy-wise, from Josh Hill, I think Josh Hill was supposed to be this great fantasy option because we saw Jimmy Graham play out, and that obviously didn't happen. Coby Fleener, just giving you what I think he's going to do. I think he's going to be awesome in New Orleans. I really do. I wasn't a huge supporter of the signing. I think they paid him a little too much, but besides the point, he's on the team. It's happened. It's over. Move on from that. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be a top tight end in the league. Just think of all he can do with Drew Brees. Drew Brees made Ben Watson a top 6 fantasy tight end and really a top 8 tight end in the NFL last year. If Drew Brees can do that with Ben Watson, he's going to do it with Coby Fleener. Coby Fleener, I know Scott did an excellent article around the time Fleener was signed, and he had a lot of good to say. Fleener is a great route runner. He's got good hands, and I think he's going to be excellent. I expect 1,000 yards from Fleener and probably 6 or more touchdowns. I think the way the Saints use the tight end in their system, Fleener's perfect for it. Like I said, I think they overpaid him, but he's on the team, and it's what it is, and I think he's going to be great. I really do.
Now, can I ask you, I'm a big I love kind of the chase in Dynasty, if you will, looking for some of those deeper sleeper kind of guys.
Yes.
And for me, one of the realizations I had last draft season was how big a deal special teams contributions are. At the running back position, they added Marcus Murphy last year, who, kind of following the Sproles path a little bit, got to catch on as a return man, maybe works into some third down usage. I know they've got Cadet and Ingram and Spiller and all this kind of stuff, but can you talk at all about Marcus Murphy and whether or not he could be kind of one of these guys, undersized but really functionally athletic, if you will, and that he's a difference maker in the pass game and the return game, and maybe could steal some carries as well?
Actually, I really like Marcus Murphy a lot. I think it was a great pick. We actually saw him do excellent things in the return game last year. He brought a punt back against Carolina. So people don't remember the Carolina game. I don't know, maybe not a lot of our viewers are Saints fans. But look, that was I believe that was week 3. We almost beat Carolina in Carolina with Luke McCown. Marcus Murphy had a huge punt return for a touchdown. Murphy, I don't see him tying into the pass game a lot. I think Tim Hightower, Ingram, Cadet are going to be bigger roles. I think we're going to see Murphy more as a punt returner, special teams guy. If you want me to stop the Saints, making a great pick. I'm glad it didn't get worse.
On Rankins.
Yeah, that's the pick they need to make. But, Marcus Murphy, fantasy-wise, I don't see much. But, I think you mentioned it. You said Sproles. That's exactly who he's built like. He's got the hands for Sproles. He's not a good pass blocker. But I think Murphy can have an impact. I think he could have an impact if Tim Hightower wasn't in the picture, put it that way. I mean,
Okay.
Kyrie Robinson's gone, so, who knows with Murphy, but if he can beat out Cadet.
Yeah, and it's such a long shot, and I hate to bring it up, but we want to try to keep a fantasy football twist on the show.
Of course, I love it.
And so I was the way that I try to approach it is to get as many elite pass catching assets as I can, and then just stash a lot of these kind of upside running backs. Maybe 1 or 2 of them pan out, and maybe I cut 4 or 5 over a 2-year period. But just churning the bottom of the roster. Marcus Murphy's a guy that I've had on my watch list for a little while now. So we go to the Dolphins now that the Saints are off the board, and we can talk a little bit more about the Saints. But there was talk. 3 of the 6 mocks had Ezekiel Elliott going to the Dolphins. One of those had them trading up to get Elliott. Eli Apple, Shaq Lawson, and then there was another trade scenario where Jack Conklin would get picked here. So I would say this is pretty wide open for the Dolphins right now. I don't necessarily think that there's much room for fantasy intrigue, because I don't think that there's a wide receiver that should go to them. They've got a pretty crowded depth chart. Quarterback, I wouldn't think so. Running back, there's no real value. Tight end, none of that really makes sense here. Mm-hmm. But I guess just kind of taking a quick look at the Dolphins depth chart. They let Rashard Matthews walk in the offseason. Presumably, they're going to roll with a 3 wide receiver set that looks like Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, and Jarvis Landry. Do you have any kind of thoughts? Kenny Stills is a former Saint. I thought it was kind of bizarre the way that he got traded after being really pretty good as a 21 and 22-year-old there in New Orleans. Devontae Parker, obviously, is still kind of a half-baked success. The indicators are going in the right direction, but what's your read on the Dolphins' passing attack?
The Dolphins' passing attack, actually, I was incredibly high on the Dolphins heading into last year. Fantasy-wise and NFL-wise, I thought they were a dark horse to compete for that division. I was obviously wrong. Fantasy-wise, they're tough to counter. If you remember last year, I remember Rashard Matthews was one of the hottest picks off the waiver wire in the middle of the year. He was hogging up receptions and touchdowns. The passing attack in Miami is colluded. I think Jarvis Landry is a big reason for that. In PPR leagues, I think Jarvis Landry is an incredible guy to pick. A little bit later, just because of he doesn't put up big yardage. Usually just high volume target guy. I think Devontae Parker is going to have a big year for Miami. He, when me and Scott did a recap of kind of guys we're looking forward to for next season, I think Devontae was the top of our list. Kenny Stills, I can tell you right now, it was weird for the Saints to trade him, but I think Breeze had a lot to do with Kenny Stills. Breeze made Kenny Stills a little bit better. He wasn't always a great route runner, in my opinion. He was just one of those stretch guys. We saw him get replaced in New Orleans with hitting a blockage here. That undrafted receiver we had in New Orleans. Willie Snead, thank you very much. Willie Snead jumped into that role and captured it just like Stills did. So I don't see Stills being a big fantasy option next year. Maybe in deeper leagues. 14 plus. I think Kenny Stills is definitely draftable. Other than that, I don't personally seem to be being draftable. With Rashard Matthews leaving, I think Parker, Landry, they're going to be the two guys. Parker, I think, can play the outside. Is a little bit bigger than Landry. So I think Parker is going to be in for a big year next year. That's going to be one of the guys I'm targeting. Plus, Adam Gase is going to do nothing but help that fantasy-wise. Adam Gase loves to air it out. So we should see a lot from the Dolphins next year fantasy-wise, especially in the wide receiver group.
All right, so Andrew, I'm going to share my screen here real quick. I've got the RotoViz box score scout app pulled up, and I've got it queued up to Ezekiel Elliott. Sorry, 1 second. I've got it queued up to Ezekiel Elliott, and we're looking at him based on draft, position, weight, 40-yard dash, rushing yards per game, and career receiving yards per game. Just kind of get a baseline. And when you see these names who come up as his comparables, down the left here, you got Trent Richardson, Ryan Matthews, so on and so forth. What about that list jumps out to you if you're someone looking at Ezekiel Elliott as potentially the top overall pick in a rookie draft?
If I'm looking at Ezekiel Elliott, and if I'm looking at this list you're giving me right now, I think his floor. I think he equates well to Jonathan Stewart. Very similar. I think if I'm seeing that correctly, I think Elliott ran a 4.6. Stewart ran a 4.46, I believe. So I think floor-wise, I think that's who Elliott can be. I think Elliott's upside is tremendous. I think he can be upside of Adrian Peterson. The thing that impresses me most about Ezekiel Elliott, his pass blocking skills is incredible. I don't know if you're big with if you follow PFF. Pro Football Focus has Ezekiel Elliott as the highest ranked pass blocker to ever come out of college since they've been doing it. I know that's only 16 years maybe, but I just think he's excellent. Laramie Tunsil just went off the board. If you didn't notice, that's incredible.
Yep.
But back to Elliott. Elliott's going to be great, man. He's a great pass blocker. That's going to allow him to play 3 downs, especially in Dallas. I think he should be everybody's dynasty target. If you're in a dynasty league where you're picking rookies in the next few weeks, Ezekiel Elliott needs to be at the top of the board. He's in a crowded backfield right now, which could potentially hurt him for this year. I won't. That's why I was shocked with the Cowboys picking him. But with that offensive line, with Tony Romo, I think Ezekiel Elliott is going to be great next year. I think we saw him catch 32 passes with Ohio State. So I think Elliott's going to command everything. I think he can play 3rd down. He can pass block. He can catch. His route running isn't incredibly impressive. He's not very good laterally. He's running vertically. He's good north-south guy. That's why I can see him being like an Adrian Peterson type runner, just not as fast. I think he's just got to kind of gain that breakaway speed. But if you're a dynasty owner, if you're any fantasy owner, I think Ezekiel Elliott should be your number 1 pick. I see him next year with running back 1 upside. I could see him finishing top 12. I can see him finishing, bottom 3. But I think Ezekiel Elliott needs to be the target.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting here just looking at this Dolphins pick real quick. Because looking at their offensive linemen, they have let's see. Is Juwan James. Do you know that name, offensive lineman out of Tennessee? If I'm not mistaken,
he's out of Tennessee.
Yeah, so they've essentially got like 4 first-round linemen on their roster now, because Brandon Albert that they brought over from Kansas City, Mike Pouncey was a first-round pick, Juwan James is a first-round pick. Now they got Tunsil. So the Dolphins are sort of very quietly, maybe not quietly, but adding a lot of real premium offensive linemen to their roster. With Gase, he inherits a great situation with a pretty good running back stable, in my opinion, at least as far as young upside guys. Ajayi, Damian Williams. I mean, even Juwan Edwards had a great college career. None of those guys are stars. Let me be clear about that. But potential, we build a great offensive lineman or a great offensive line, and then you give these young guys a shot. I think there's a lot of intrigue there. It'll be really interesting if they don't trade any of those guys, or if they don't draft another running back, I should say, to replace them.
Going Tunzel, tremendous upside. I mean, this was the guy who about a month and a half ago we saw going number 1 overall. So great upside pick for them. But you mentioned it, the running backs. I feel like they need to kind of trade up in the second round and grab a good running back, because I'm worried about Jay Ajayi. I liked him a little bit last year, but he resembled a third down back. I don't see him as an every down back. I think maybe them going someone like Derrick Henry, who's just a vertical up and down guy, I think could be big for them. So that's what I'd look for, to see if they're going to build up an O-line to get a running back, because Adam Gase loves his running backs. I think C.J. Anderson would have been awesome for him, but that didn't pan out. So interesting to see what goes on in Miami, especially with that next pick tomorrow.
All right, so we've got Scott Smith has joined us. Scott, what's going on, man?
What's going on, guys?
Oh, just talking draft, talking the Saints. Got a great breakdown a few minutes ago about just kind of what's going on in the Saints world, particularly with the pass catching regime. Talking a little about Coby Fleener, the emergence of Willie Snead. So yeah, definitely a good segment there. So yeah, go ahead. Do you have any just immediate reactions based on what you've seen so far?
So far, I've been trying to keep up with things. I think the Saints made a smart pick in picking Sheldon Rankins. For once, they actually go with the player that a lot of people thought and mocked to him. Sheldon Rankins was actually mocked over from April 1st to now. He was mocked to them over 3 times more than any other player. So I think that was actually a smart pick. The big surprise to me is just the fall of Tunsil all the way down to Miami, and Miami getting what I think is a steal of a player. I mean, you're talking somebody that has the talent that could have went, number 1, and now you look at the running back situation that they have over there. I still think Miami's going to get some running back help later on in this draft, but it's interesting what kind of offensive line they're building.
Definitely. And we're now to the Raiders at pick 14. I mean, across the board, I saw defensive talent, whether that's Nkemdiche, Hargraves and Floyd are now off the board, so they're out of the question. But Miles Jack, William Jackson, looks like the pick is in, so we won't have a ton of time to talk Raiders. But if you're looking at the offensive side of the ball real quick for them, I mean, obviously Amari Cooper last year was a big storyline, but Andrew, do you have any thoughts on kind of the rebuild of the Raiders and how that's going?
Yeah, can you still hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right, cool. Lagging over here a little bit. I heard offensive rebuild of the Raiders. I'm in all over the Raiders. I'm a big fan of what they're doing over there. The resurgence of Michael Crabtree last year was huge. Fantasy-wise, it was incredible. That was a waiver wire guy who was a wide receiver 2 last year. Amari Cooper, Crabtree, Carr, just great core guys. Latavius Murray even. Great core guys for them offensive-wise. I think they're going to go defense here. I assume maybe Nkemdiche or William Jackson, possibly.
Yeah, and the pick's in. It's Karl Joseph, defensive back, safety out of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Safety. I thought they'd go cornerback over safety.
Yeah, Karl Joseph is a guy that a lot of people thought would be a higher first-round pick had he not been dealing with the injury. I mean, he's a guy, as far as if you want to watch somebody make highlights in defensive plays, he brings the wood and lays it down, especially for a small guy.
Sorry, one second. Max comparing him to Brian Dawkins. I wanted to see what the comparison he was going to the well for was. So.
Yeah, they lost. I mean, I thought they were going cornerback. That's shocking for me. I thought they were going to shore up cornerback. I mean, they need a cornerback.
Yeah. So at pick 15, This is going to be the last pick with Andrew joining us. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
We've got the so hold on. Who's on the board at 15? It's not still. Oh, it's the Browns, right? Because they traded with the Titans.
The Browns are on, and this is going to be. I think this is going to be a pick where we don't. I don't know if we know who's coming. I don't feel like they're going to go wide receiver, even though I think they need wide receiver. They obviously need wide receiver. My guess would be they go Shaq Lawson. If I had to take a shot in the dark.
Any chance this is Paxton Lynch?
Look, to be honest, I was calling when they traded back to 8. When they first made that original deal with Tennessee, Tennessee. I thought they were going for Paxton. Or not Tennessee, Philadelphia. Excuse me. I don't know why I said Tennessee, but Paxton Lynch is the first thing I called for. I thought Hugh wanted his quarterback, and to me, I'm big on Carson Wentz and Goff. I thought it would have made sense for them to stay there and take Wentz. They signed RG3 and them going with this RG3 project. I know Scott's a Redskins guy, so I don't know how he feels about that. But I thought they were going to go quarterback, and them trading down to 8, I thought it was going to be Paxton Lynch, and then you hear the Saints talk, and then you hear Cleveland trading down. So I could see Paxton Lynch. It makes sense to me, but maybe they're going to hold back for the second round with. They have 7 picks in the top 100. Maybe they're going to save their pick for Connor Cook or Hackenberg later.
Yeah. So hey Scott, as we kind of stand here and look at the board, I'm thinking about who is it that has really fallen so far. I mean, the highest guys that were mocked that haven't seen come off the board yet: Miles Jack, Corey Coleman. We haven't seen Shaq Lawson off the board yet. I mean, Mackenzie Alexander. Did any of those names, like, does one name out of those stand out to you?
The one name that really stands out to me would be Miles Jack. I mean, talent-wise, and you look at today's NFL and you want a linebacker who can cover. He's a guy who can cover and do a lot of the things that you want in today's NFL as far as staying on the field for all 3 downs. The medical checkup is what's so surprising that the news didn't come out early. I mean, it's obvious that that's why he's going down right now. It's because of the knee, but you just have to wonder what team's going to jump up and take a chance to get him. And with early picks like this, it's hard to be a GM that's picking in the top half of the draft and taking that chance. So he's the guy that's really surprising me right now.
All right, so keeping the focus on the Browns then, let's just look at kind of their offensive depth chart real quick. I'm going to do a quick screen share so that you all can see that. I mean, it is pretty putrid if you ask me. I mean, really, where – can you guys see that right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, your top 2 receivers on your line. I mean, even your top 4 receivers: Andrew Hawkins, Taylor Gabriel, Brian Hartline, Marlon Moore. I mean, geez. And then you got Gary Barnidge and a handful of second-year tight ends, a running back, Crowell, Duke Johnson, and then a bunch of guys that most people probably never even heard of. I mean, I think the real bright spot on the offense is probably Duke Johnson, who I think caught 61 balls last year, which is outstanding for a running back, one of the best totals in the league. I mean, heck, he had almost as many receptions as any rookie period last year, never mind running back or wide receiver. So, I mean, where do you even start if you're the Browns here?
I mean, if I'm the Browns, you would think they have to have some wide receiver help because you don't know what's going on with Josh Gordon, if he's going to actually be able to get reinstated come August or not. A lot of guys are high, and I've heard Laquon Treadwell mention going to the Browns, but I think this is a spot where Corey Coleman could go. I mean, he's the guy that I'd be looking for as far as getting a playmaker that can make somewhat of a difference. And then if Josh Gordon does manage to come back and having Corey Coleman in that number 2 role, I think that would be something that would make sense. Yeah,
I mean, personally, I think for the Browns, I think kind of that intermediate passing game. I think someone who's a little more physical. I think Treadwell can make a lot of sense there. But we'll see. I mean, this is, like you said, I think it was Andrew who said it. This pick could really be anybody.
Yeah, I think I agree with Scott though. I think they really do need a wide receiver. I don't know if they should, grab one in the second round. Like I said, they have all these picks. I don't know if one of the wide receivers will drop to them, but it'll be interesting to see who they go. I mean, it's obvious that their defense kind of can hold up. I think the defense can remain middle of the road. So maybe wide receiver is their best pick. I just don't know if they view Corey Coleman as the best wide receiver on the board.
One of the things that interests me about this pick with Cleveland is that Cleveland's one of the more analytical-driven teams.
Corey Coleman.
There you go.
There it
Look
is.
at that. Good call, Scott.
Wow.
Hey, they need it. I mean, that's your best wide receiver in the draft. I originally kind of was a huge Treadwell fan, but I know Scott knows all the numbers better than I do. But I thought Coleman impressed down the stretch before the draft. He's 5'11", so I think he can play the outside. But I think that's your best chance. I don't know if Corey Coleman had off the field issues. I think he might have had some, but there you go. 5'10", 195 pounds. Good hands.
Yeah, if you check out the player card that we've got up, thanks to Scott for making these. I mean, you can see that just in terms of raw production, just beastly. 113 yards a game, almost 2 touchdowns per game. I want to say he had 20 touchdowns in his first 8 games before the Baylor quarterback situation went to hell. I mean, the explosion athletically is obvious. I mean, I came up with a couple comps. The Torrey Smith, Santonio Holmes. I think Odell Beckham on there as well as sort of the super, the upside play of that. But, I mean, Corey Coleman to Cleveland, I think that probably dampers some people's thoughts on him fantasy-wise, just because the Browns aren't exactly, a love motel for goodness of fantasy production. But, I think the fact that he's the first receiver off the board speaks volumes to how they feel about him.
Excellent pick.
John, I want to get your take on the Coleman pick. Do you think that with Cleveland being more analytically driven and kind of how we do things at RotoViz and breaking down the numbers and especially with some of the age-adjusted stuff that you do you think that plays into the Coleman pick, especially with him going over Laquon Treadwell, who a lot of draft analysts seem to think was the #1 receiver?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think here's the angle I think you can tell about Coleman is what they're doing right here on the NFL Network is saying that, let's say, these AFC North games, it's a lot of, kind of boxed in, lots of defense, lots of running, that's kind of the archetype that you think about. And in those kind of cold weather, bad condition games, you hit Corey Coleman on a slant and he shakes the guy and he's gone. You know what I mean? And so if you're looking for instant offense, I think that Corey Coleman can really be that guy as far as generating big plays for your team. And yeah, I mean, I think if you want to make the case, we were talking earlier that the Browns presumably shifting more analytical, and the fact that they keep trading back essentially tips their hand that they think that the high-end picks are overvalued, the maybe mid-first round, second, third round picks are undervalued, and that's why they're trying to get a surplus of those. But yeah, I mean, as far as Coleman, I mean, he's got metrically just about everything you could want. The athleticism, I mean, his 20-yard split on his 40-yard dash is insane. One of the best that I have seen anywhere. So really getting up to that mid-range speed quickly. Real sparky guy, real strong guy. I mean, I know he wasn't asked to block a lot at Baylor, but I think Matt Miller from Bleacher Report had a great comment on the podcast recently where he said just because a guy wasn't asked to do something in that scheme doesn't mean that guy can't do it. So yeah, that's kind of my quick take on Coleman. Andrew, any parting shots before we bring in 14-team mocker to carry us for the next 5?
No, just that I appreciate the invite to come on here with y'all and keep up the good work. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to follow Andrew on Twitter, you can check out the rotoviz.com/live page where we've got everything linked, everyone from the show, where you can connect with them and catch up with their work. So, Andrew, we bid you a good evening and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you all very much. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Take it easy.
See you, Scott.
All right, and so as we get to the 16th pick in the Lions, that pick came off real quick. That is Taylor Decker from Ohio State. That is the fifth Buckeye or fourth Buckeye off the board. So they're definitely making some moves for the Big Ten here. Mocker, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm here with my dog, too. He didn't know who Karl Joseph was 10 minutes ago, but he's stoked now.
Nice. And so we've got Taylor Decker here at 16, Karl Joseph, and then the Browns with Corey Coleman. Just kind of updating my big board, making sure we're good to go. But all right, so Mocker, as we bring you on, just kind of impressions so far of the draft. What are your thoughts?
I'm stoked with Elliott to the Cowboys. That's awesome. You think he's going to be redraft 1-1?
Redraft 1-1?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I can see where you're going with that. I don't know if I would quite make that bold of a jump right out of the gate, but I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Gurley was kind of a late first-round pick last year as a rookie, wasn't he? Or was he later than that?
Gurley was picked 10 or 12. It was significantly later, though. But the Rams, just as a team, a lot of what Gurley did just got stopped right at the line of scrimmage, and he still managed to be like high-end 2 in, 13 games, 12 games. I think that Elliott is the only player you're really going to argue about with Elliott would be Le'Veon Bell. And I still think running back is going to be 1-1, 1-2 in redraft. So, yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. I'm surprised the Giants didn't take a wide receiver when they had their pick of all of them when they were on the board. But other than that, yeah, Chargers shook things up. Sure, the Dolphins got a steal on Tunsil. I mean, stuff like that is usually pretty meaningless. But yeah, other than that, Corey Coleman of the Browns, pretty interesting. You guys think RG3 is definitely the starter there?
I don't know. I don't really know what to make of the Browns situation. I mean, obviously they're very intentional with what they're doing, but I won't claim to know what they're doing.
You surprised that Coleman went over Treadwell?
No, I mean, honestly, I think Doxson, Coleman, or Treadwell, I think you could have made a case for any of those three being the top receiver drafted. So looking at the Falcons real quick, Scott, that's still kind of in your neck of the woods with the NFC South. By the mock drafts that I'm looking at, Shaq Lawson, Darron Lee, Keanu Neal are really the only three players out of 6 mock drafts that I saw going there. Does it make sense? Is there anything that you look at the Falcons offensively and think that, man, they really are missing out by not going on the offensive side of the ball with this pick?
Well, what I'm kind of looking at is, do we really think Mohamed Sanu is going to be the answer as the number 2? I mean, they went last year wide receiver with Justin Hardy. He's more of a slot guy. He's not going to really take a lot of attention or away from Julio Jones. They really kind of need a tight end. I don't think Jacob Tammy's the answer either. I would look for Hunter Henry more to go in the second round, but it wouldn't shock me to see Laquon Treadwell go here. You have another big guy. He's more of a possession guy in that build, and I think he would be the perfect kind of person to go with what they have in Julio Jones. But with the signing and the money that they spent on Sanu, it's kind of hard to see that happening. Shaq Lawson is the guy that's kind of dropping. A lot of people thought that he had top 10 talent. I know he was one of I think it was the second overall defensive end as far as the combine and how he tested athletically. You know, you look, they took another Clemson guy last year in Vic Beasley. Could they go ahead and put a guy like Shaq Lawson, who's pretty stout against the run as well, on the other side? That's a possibility.
I think Justin Hunter is a lot more interesting than Mohamed Sanu. I think we know what Mohamed Sanu is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we know what Justin Hunter is.
Well, hey, gentlemen, I'm going to bid you a good evening here and transition over the rest of the show to Scott. Scott will be on with Mocker, and then we've got Nick Whalen from Dynasty League Football coming on the show, and then Matt Friedman will be back to close out with the last 6 picks. So with that, I'll remind everyone that if you want to support the pod and support the work that we're doing, you can go to rotoviz.com/podcast and sign up there. But otherwise, I think that's a wrap for draft night, and I'm going to head back over to Twitter and keep getting after it there.
All right, man. Happy birthday.
All right, thanks, Scott. I'll catch you guys later.
Take it easy, man.
So, do we have the pick in yet over in Atlanta? Let's check it out. It's saying the pick's in. It's Keanu Neal out of Florida. How do you think this affects that defense over in Atlanta?
I mean, they were having trouble stopping people last year. I still think there's more to do, obviously. But I mean, do you think that makes sense over a wide receiver?
I mean, for the defense that they have and the way they did move the ball, you have to look at what they think that they have in Sanu. I feel like you know what Sanu is, but there's a lot of other wide receivers here, and if you think Keanu Neal, who was actually a top 100 recruit coming out of high school, I mean, if you think he's the second best safety after Karl Joseph, then I can understand why they went there. So whether or not it makes a difference in their defense overall and what they have to deal with in the NFC South, that I don't really think it's going to make a big impact to their team. So the Colts are on the clock next, and it looks like they're getting their pick in pretty fast.
Grixon knows who he wants. This will be really good. I'm guessing.
Who do you see the Colts going with?
I really hope he takes a wide receiver.
I think that would be the one that would shock everybody. Do you think
lost Andre Johnson? He's got to replace.
Do you think they overreached last year getting a wide receiver out of Miami and Philip Dorsett?
I think they reached on the player, and I think the pick made no sense either. And that team's just not constructed well, and it shows. I mean, they have a lot of trouble in a lot of different game situations because they don't have the right personnel.
How do you feel about last year and the way that Frank Gore did what he could, but he's really at the end of his career? I was a big fan of maybe Indianapolis trying to trade up and get into the range to go after one of the running backs here, especially Elliott, but Elliott went early to 4. Do you think they addressed that running back position early in this draft?
The problem is that they already paid Gore for this year. It was in his signing bonus last year. I wrote about this, and I'm actually taking Gore in MFL 10s because his ADP is ridiculously low. It's in like the 9th round, and I've been taking him because, they already paid him for this year. And I think even if they draft someone, they're going to, I think this is like his farewell year. They're not going to, bench him for I don't think they're going to take a rookie particularly high. I mean, of course, now they're going to take Henry with this pick. I bet that's what Grixon wants, right?
It wouldn't shock me to see them go ahead and pick, but I think I've actually seen Henry going. They said rumors that he might not even make it in the second round. They had him drop into the 3rd round on some boards, which was quite shocking to me, especially with a lot of the work that we've done and where he ranks on our running back list. So that would shock me more than him getting picked here.
I would definitely, I don't think he's making it out of the top of the 2nd round. I really think Seattle would take him in the 1st. I don't know. I'd be pretty surprised if he makes it out of the top half of the 2nd round for sure.
With the Colts and with Andrew Luck coming back this year, how do you kind of project that offense? How do you think there's going to be, what's the split that you're looking for as far as increase with Dante Moncrief and a balance maybe with T.Y. Hilton with Andrew Luck being there for a full season?
I don't know if Moncrief's going to play full snaps. I know everyone is valuing him that way, and they think the release of Andre Johnson means that, but I don't know if Dante Moncrief is going to play full snaps on that team. It looks like he is now, but I think that could change. I think Hilton is being underdrafted in all formats. Hilton's under contract with Indy through 2020. They really like him, and he even put up really consistent numbers last year with Hasselbeck and Whitehurst and whatever else they had playing. And yeah, I think Hilton's being underdrafted. I'm surprised Luck is going as late as he is because I think the defense is still not good. And I do think Gore is going to be the primary running back and be fairly ineffective. They might draft someone to fill that Ahmad Bradshaw role, but I still think it'll be mostly passing, and they still play in the AFC South, and none of those defenses are particularly good. So I think the Colts offense is going to continue to be very fantasy friendly, but I think Dwayne Allen is the one who's being really underdrafted. He's kind of being ignored, and I think he's going to really be a benefactor.
Yeah, so the pick of the center from Alabama. So they go offensive line. I know their offensive line's given them problems in the past, so they try to get the offensive line and Frank Gore. It makes him a little bit more attractive if he's got a top offensive lineman like that coming off early. It's actually pretty early for what centers normally get picked. So, I mean, they have to be pretty confident with his ability.
Yeah, I remember people thought the Cowboys reached on Frederick really bad, and that turned out to be a brilliant pick. So. You need a good center. I'm sure it won't hurt.
All right, we're moving on. It looks like Buffalo's on the clock. Where do you see them going? I mean, we've had some conversation as to whether or not Tyrod Taylor's the answer for them at quarterback. Lynch is still floating around out there. Do you think they maybe go quarterback, or do you see them adding another offensive piece?
I would imagine. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think they're nuts for not wrapping Tyrod Taylor up. I don't know what direction they want to go there, but I think it would be very strange to take a quarterback and then try and trade him as opposed to the other way around. But I don't know. What do you think? I can't imagine they go quarterback here. But that would shock me.
Yeah. I don't really think they're going to go quarterback. I actually think they're going to go defense. Shaq Lawson, you've got him floating around out there. I think they need somebody to replace what they lost at defensive end. That defense. You're looking at a defensive coach in Rex Ryan. So I really have to see and think that they're going to go on the defensive side of the ball. The other thing that they do have. They don't really have a solid option besides Sammy Watkins on the other side of the ball. They lost Chris Hogan. Percy Harvin seems like he's done. He's not going to play. And you're really talking about Robert Woods. So could Laquon Treadwell maybe be the other piece to sit there and be on the other side of Sammy Watkins? I mean, that's possibly an option.
I hope not, because Bobby Woods is my guy. I like Robert Woods. I really would like to see him get that opportunity. They also brought in Leonard Hankerson, which my favorite player of all time. So I don't want them to take a wide receiver, but they probably should. But yeah, I was thinking the same thing about defense, about replacing Mario Williams, and I'm sure Rex has some input as to who he wants, or at least is trying to convince him of who he wants. So, yeah, I was thinking defense as well.
I think defense is going to have to be the way to go. I mean, looking at you're talking Jarius Wynn is their defensive end as far as their roster. You do have Jerry Hughes, who they paid, I think last year. I think he got the big check. But I think they're going to have to replace that left defensive end position. It wouldn't surprise me to see Shaq Lawson, maybe Noah Spence, if they really like him. But I would think that they're going to go with one of those two guys. If not, I would be surprised if they really went in a different route.
Do you think LaShawn McCoy is going to be suspended?
The last I heard was that they did reopen the case. They were looking into exactly what went down in there. Do you recall, did they actually video LaShawn McCoy throwing a punch? Is that what happened?
If a video exists, I do not believe, I've never heard of one or seen it. I'm not sure if a video exists or not.
Well, I do know that a video does exist. I did see part of the video where he was arguing and doing some of that, but I didn't see what exactly happened in the altercation. Being that it was also with some police officers, it's going to be hard to say what's going to happen. You would think they're going to push to kind of have the backs of the police officers that were involved, but I mean,
Yeah,
as far as right now.
From what I read, the police officers were not happy with the district attorney because they weren't pressing charges, and they were putting pressure on them to do it, and that's why they reopened the case. So I can't imagine he is, but I think that would be really interesting if he is. Yeah, I don't know what they got going on up there. They're nuts for not locking up Tyrod Taylor. I don't know what they're thinking.
One question with Shady McCoy, how much do you think Carlos Williams takes a chunk out of his production this year? I mean, when Carlos Williams got the ball last year, he was super productive and very efficient with the touches that he did get.
I think it'll be something like Thomas Jones and Sean Green in like 2008, 2009, something like that. And that I think McCoy would still be, very, very valuable, but Williams would have value, but I don't think it would be enough to really take McCoy out of like the range that he's going in. I think the worry is really more suspension, but I don't see him getting suspended.
Yeah, I would think that if there was enough to charge him, they would have went ahead and did it the first time. The fact that the Attorney General is reopening it, I think they're just doing their due diligence to make sure. And with that being said, the pick for Buffalo is actually in, and it's Shaq Lawson, defensive end.
Yeah, you called that.
And that's going to go ahead and put the Jets on the clock. And this is the part of the draft that I was most excited to see. Getting into the 20s, I had no inclination that Lynch was going to go as early as what they were saying. The Jets have been battling back and forth with Ryan Fitzpatrick. The offense actually really looked good. I was a guy who had a lot of Brandon Marshall and a lot of Eric Decker and even had him stacked on a few teams last year. And I liked what the offense did with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick is actually holding out now, and it said that he's willing to even sit out the season with something I heard earlier today. Where do you see them going? Do you think they address the quarterback situation here, or are they going to pass?
I saw that guy from ESPN, Rich Cimini, I think is how you say it. He said they're going to take Hackenberg. That Mike Mackinac loves Christian Hackenberg, and he wants to take him with this pick. And I don't know if that's just like a negotiating play with Fitzpatrick or what they're doing. Wasn't Geno Smith the starter headed into last season until he got punched in the face? Why isn't he their starting quarterback? I don't know what they're doing.
I think part of the issue with Geno Smith was the whole situation that transpired last year. I think he really lost the locker room and a lot of his teammates by not paying the money with the debt that he did owe. So I almost feel like the front office has kind of just written Geno Smith off, even though I think Geno Smith does have some ability to put up some numbers if he was given the opportunity. The funny thing is that you mentioned Hackenberg, and I know when we did our RotoViz rankings, I'm high on Hackenberg. I like Hackenberg, and I have absolutely no numbers to back up why. I watched some of the things he did, and there's a lot of times where he threw the ball away. So when I looked at the composite rankings we did at RotoViz for pre-draft and the quarterbacks, I was the only guy that was really putting Hackenberg up higher than what a lot of the other ones are. And I could be completely wrong, but I think he knows the game. And what he did as a freshman, making pre-snap reads in an NFL-type offense, quarterback's one of those things where the numbers don't always tell how a player processes information and views defenses, pre-snap reads and whatnot. So if you go look online and check out any of the work by Brett Coleman has a real good video on YouTube breaking down Hackenberg and why he thought Hackenberg would be able to succeed. And I tend to agree with a lot of them. So for Hackenberg going here to the Jets, I think it's a little bit early to be picking him, but I do like Hackenberg as a player.
I just wish that this draft was happening in Radio City if they do take him, so you could see the Jets fans just lose their minds like they used to. That'll just make me sad that we won't get to see that. But I mean, their team's pretty rock solid. I mean, they can afford to reach a little. I really have no concept of what would be reaching for those guys. I think you have to have a better gauge of how other people around the league value that. But they probably have a good feel for that, and I think they can afford to reach a little, but yeah, we'll see. I'm not. People don't really like Fitzpatrick. I think fantasy players like him a lot more than people who aren't in it for that reason. Jet fans don't really like him. The Jets front office clearly doesn't like him. I don't. It's kind of weird. I don't know. When I watch him play, he looks real legit. He looks like he has a great handle on how to push that offense.
Yeah. Nick Whalen is actually Nick Whalen's jumping on and joining us. Go ahead. Yeah, Nick Whalen's actually joining us. He's a writer for Dynasty League Football, the co-host of the DLF Dynasty podcast. We're actually talking about the Jets and going off on a little bit of a Christian Hackenberg, Geno Smith tirade. Get you to go ahead and jump in. Where do you think the Jets are going to go with this pick?
It's a really good it's a guess for anyone. I'm not on the Hackenberg train that you are, so
I seem to be in the minority no matter where I go. There's not a lot of people that like Hackenberg, so.
Yeah, I mean, he has the size. I mean, there's a lot of things that seem to be there, but the accuracy is just so inconsistent. It scares me. I actually have Cardale Jones as my number 3.
Ooh. Yeah, one of the things, and I've done some study on a lot of the quarterback statistics, and I don't think that there has been a quarterback that has had any sort of real success in the NFL coming into the draft with as low of a completion percentage as what Hackenberg's had throughout his career. So that would be quite a shock. I mean, I think Hackenberg needs to have some of his mechanics refined, especially in his footwork, but I think the tools are there to develop as a quarterback, and like I said, I'm in quite the minority for that, but it wouldn't shock me and I wouldn't be dissatisfied with the pick for the Jets.
Yeah, I don't know. And the one thing that you do hear too is you hear that the Jets were looking at wide receiver, which just seems so odd with how the makeup of their team and with Devin Smith last year. I know he had the injury, but I mean, they don't really have a whole lot outside of the top 2. If Smith doesn't come back, I mean, they're going Jeremy Curley and was it Kenbrell Thompkins? You know what I mean? Like it was tough for them to get some other weapons there, but I can't see them going wide receiver either.
Hey, Mocker, I want to get your take on something real quick. What do you think we see out of Jason Morrow coming back? I mean, he was a rookie at tight end that kind of a lot of people were high on, coming into the league. He's been hurt, hadn't really done anything whatsoever in the NFL. Do you think he can come in and make any sort of difference next year in this offense?
I was going to say, I like Jason Morrow. And there's Quincy Enunwa, too. He's not terrible, but... Yeah, I was looking at some of the tight ends drafted over the past 5 years with pretty high capital, like Gavin Escobar and Vance McDonald and Troy Nicholas and Jason Morrow, who have done next to nothing in the NFL. And I was thinking about how people's patience doesn't really line up with career arcs of wide receivers, and that a lot of times wide receivers won't really become relevant until they're in the league for 2 or 3 years. So I think there's some guys to keep guys to keep an eye on, and Amaro is definitely one of them. I think he has a great opportunity in that offense.
Yeah, Nick, how do you view Amaro? I mean, is he a guy that y'all kind of keep on the radar over at DLF?
There's some people that are a little bit higher on him. I wasn't high on him out of Texas Tech. I mean, I know he had the size, but in that offense, I mean, he was just kind of a glorified wide receiver. I didn't see enough really toughness out of him or athletic ability to really separate. So, I mean, him being a high-end wide receiver or high-end tight end 2 or tight end 1, I just don't see that as an option. So I'm kind of shying away from him, especially with all of the targets they have there now. I mean, I don't know what he's going to have left.
It looks like the Jets go defense, outside linebacker Darron Lee, who looks to be one of the more athletic linebackers in this draft. Does that surprise either of y'all?
I thought their defense was pretty loaded. Maybe they'll. I know that the Muhammad Wilkerson trade was on the table, but I think that defense is just stacked. And Todd Bowles, I think they're going to be real tough. And I definitely, it doesn't help Miami, New England, and Buffalo at all. I think the Jets are legit. They should figure out what the hell they're doing at quarterback.
Yeah. That's going to bring us to pick 21. My Washington Redskins are on the clock. I'm pretty pumped up. I don't know where they're going to go. I actually think defensive tackle was one of the spots that I was looking at. But one of the guys they've been rumored to like is Michael Thomas. So he's a guy to kind of keep an eye on. I'm not too high on Michael Thomas as far as a wide receiver, at least not that Michael Thomas. Where do you guys kind of have Michael Thomas in the thick of things?
I like him. I mean, I think he's the best big wide receiver in this draft, and by big, I mean he's thick. Because I mean, for height wise, Doxson's my number one, but Thomas is not only tall, but he's thick and he has long arms. He had a pretty good 3-cone. He runs some pretty good routes. So I think for a big wide receiver to do the things that he can do, he's pretty talented. I'm not sky high on him, but I think he's pretty complete. And when you go to Washington in that offense, that's kind of what they need. They need the guy that can take the intermediate stuff away from Jordan Reed, with Deshaun kind of taking the top off, and Garcon kind of coming to the end of the road here. So I can see it. There's some other options I like more. I guess I see them going defense more than anything. I think that's where the big needs are. Am I right?
Yeah, with the loss of Pot Roast, I mean, I would expect, and it actually looks like they've traded the pick to Houston, which is one of the things.
I was just going to say McClellan might trade down here, like that's his style. Yeah, I was just actually going to say, yeah, he might trade out of his spot because, yeah, he definitely might take a wide receiver, but I don't think he'd take one here.
So, Mocker, is Kirk Cousins the answer?
No.
No.
No, not at all. You think he's the answer?
As a Redskins fan, it's been so bad for so long. I'm happy with what I saw last year. As far as the fantasy football goes, he actually helped me win quite a bit of leagues last year. And, the way he warmed up and where he works and fits in this offense, you could do a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, he and Jordan Reed had the most points in the playoffs this century, both for quarterback and tight end. And, they cleaned up. It's ridiculous. But I don't know. It seems a little unlikely to repeat. But the one GM other than Belichick who, if he does something, I'm like, he's probably right, is McClellan. So, maybe he is. I default to Scott. He might be right.
So Nick, what's your take on Kirk Cousins? I mean, is he a guy that you're high on, and not necessarily high on, but is he a guy that you're willing to roll with as your quarterback next year?
Yeah, he is. I mean, quarterback's the position. I've coached a lot. I have a college coaching background, and I think he does a lot of the fundamental things well. He takes control of the offense, makes multiple reads. I mean, he's smart with his decision making, so that's everything that you want from a leader. And as we know, he's passionate because he likes that. And I think from what he proved last year, I think you have to give him at least next year, if not the year after, to see. Now I know the contract situation is going to come into play, but considering what he did and considering what you guys have had, I don't think you're going to have a high pick to spend on a replacement. So I think you have to give him probably 2 years to see if he is the answer.
So, Mocker, I know you were supposed to get out of here after pick 20. Do you want to go ahead and hang out until Houston makes this pick? And with Houston being on the clock, where do you think they're going?
I've seen people say they should take wide receiver, and I think that's crazy. I think Cecil Shorts has 1 year left on his deal, and Jalen Strong is 22. So I don't know why they'd take a wide receiver here. Their defense, it was like bipolar in the first half of the season compared to the second. I don't know, what they think needs to be fixed up there, if anything. It would be, I don't see them taking a fantasy relevant position here. Where is Hunter Henry supposed to go, overall?
I've seen him mocked in the second round, towards the top in most places. It wouldn't surprise me to see him go in the late first round. Houston is definitely in need of some tight end help.
Yeah, C.J. Fedorowicz was another one that I was looking at that high capital in the past few years that hasn't really done much. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Nick, where do you think Houston should go with this pick?
I mean, I think when you pay that much money to Brock, you have to surround him with something. You know, I know that offensive line isn't quite what it used to be in the heyday with Arian Foster and that awesome zone blocking scheme. So I don't know if you get some linemen, although that seems a little thin right now with how many of the guys that have gone. I mean, wide receiver makes the most sense to me. I just don't know what's the best match when you have Hopkins on the other side.
You don't believe in Jalen Strong? You don't think he's going to be developed into the two?
No, I'm not a big Jalen Strong fan. The biggest thing with him that interests me is how much weight he lost during the year. I mean, that was pretty significant.
Yeah, that was really bizarre. It said he went from like 210 and he like ballooned before camp, and then over the year just like shed all this weight and it got really light. That was like from like 240 to 210 or something really bizarre. And the Texans insist it was on purpose, and it's not a big deal, but it seems pretty strange.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't Jalen Strong going to be on suspension for the start of next year? Is it a 4-game suspension?
He got arrested. He didn't fail a league drug test. He got arrested for suspension of pot, which is not an automatic suspension, but could be. I would guess if he is suspended, it would be for 2 games and maybe appealed down to 1, but I'm not sure.
And with that, the pick is in, and it's Will Fuller. So, Mocker, I'm going to go ahead and give you the last little run that you had before you cut out. What do you think about Will Fuller to
From
Houston?
what I can tell, taking Fuller over Treadwell goes against everything that all of us preach all the time, and I don't know. I just gotta. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The position doesn't make sense, and the player doesn't make sense. But I don't. They know better than I do. God bless Rick Smith.
All right, Mocker, we're going to go ahead and let you get out of here. I want to thank you for joining us. For
Yeah, no
those
problem.
of you,
Have a good night, guys.
all right. For those of you who want to follow us, you can go ahead and check him out. His great work at RotoViz. Check him out on Twitter at 14TeamMocker. He is the mystery man. So, Nick, Will Fuller, is he a guy you're high on?
Who thought Will Fuller was going to go when you have some of these other guys on the board? That's probably the biggest surprise to me. But as an individual prospect, I mean, I like Will Fuller. I know people are down on him with the drops, but when you look at this wide receiver class and you want someone that has speed, you only got 2 options really with a lot of skill, and Coleman's already gone. So, you know, the NFL is a specialist type of league, and you know, you need certain guys to fill certain roles. I know us fantasy guys, you know, we want, Treadwell, he'll get all these yards and get all these catches and touchdowns, but I think when you want to pair Hopkins, who's not a speed guy, with, you know, Treadwell, not a speed guy, well, all of a sudden your safeties are going to kind of come up a little bit more. I can see putting Fuller there, and that lets Strong still develop as a red zone type of guy, maybe opposite. Fuller can be a slot guy sometimes, be on the outside. And I like how he tracks the ball. I think people underrate that part of his game. I think they underrate his route running and his fearlessness after the catch. He's not a small guy that's afraid to get hit or run in traffic. So I'm not super high on the pick, but if you needed speed, I think that's – and they moved up to get him. That's the other part of it, Scott.
Yeah, and they only moved up one spot, so it's kind of interesting to me to see what they end up giving up. It can't be much. I know Scott McLuhan wanted to get some more picks for the Redskins, so I think it's a good move for the Redskins. As far as from a fantasy perspective, dynasty-wise, do you think that's good for Fuller's prospects going to play on the other side of DeAndre Hopkins?
I mean, I think it's almost ideal because he's not going to get double teamed. I mean, there's no way a safety is going to give him more attention than Hopkins, right? At least initially, until he proves himself. So right there with Brock liking to throw the ball deep, you have a guy that has a chance to get at least some spot starts in your fantasy leagues, even his rookie year, where he can score and get some big plays for you. And long term, I mean, Hopkins is there, and that could be a good pairing. I'm not a big Brock Osweiler fan. I don't know if you are, Scott, or the show, but I'm not a big fan of him. However, he does like to throw the ball deep, and we saw with Sanders last year. So I'm not huge high on his dynasty prospects there, but I think it's better than some other places where he would have been expected too much out of the gate.
Yeah, one of the things we did at RotoViz, and as I put up Will Fuller's basically card, and you can see some of his statistics, I was one of the guys at RotoViz throughout the wide receiver Sweet 16 tournament that we did that was lower on Will Fuller, and it's not because of his drops or anything like that. It's just that when I kind of watched some of the film, the speed does translate, but that was all I saw out of him was a lot of the speed. It seemed like if it wasn't a deep post, if it wasn't a 9 route, it was a screen pass. And kind of the in-between stuff was where he struggled. Mackenzie Alexander actually broke down some film on him and talked about Will Fuller, and one of the things that he said, you take away the deep ball and you shut him down. And I just wonder if that's going to be what his MO is in the NFL. I don't see him as a Deshaun Jackson type of talent.
No, I agree with you there. And that's the other thing is you have the time speed versus the play speed. You know, Deshaun's a special guy with that burst, especially in and out of breaks, and he knows that he has that speed, you know, where he can toy with people. Fuller's not quite there, but you're right, with the slants or with a dig or with, you know, a comeback, all that stuff's not there. And the other part too is that while he can hand catch, I do see him body catch a little bit more, which means he's going to need a little bit more separation to kind of have a little bit more of an impact and to get more receptions and trusted by his quarterback. But I think trying to take away a guy that can run a 4.32 at the combine is pretty tough in its own right. And even if he does, he's going to open up a lot of stuff underneath. So, and the other part to think about for an impact, you just paid a lot of money for Brock Osweiler, but you also just did for Lamar Miller too. So this certainly has to help Lamar Miller and his fans and his owners out there, because that's definitely going to give him more running lanes when you have two viable threats on the outside.
Yeah, when we look at Will Fuller, RotoViz has him ranked as our number 5 overall wide receiver as far as pre-draft goes. I can't imagine the landing spot's really going to hurt, but he accounted for 37.4% of his team's receiving yards, 96.8 yards per game, 1.1 touchdowns per game. You talked about the 40 time. Let me ask you one thing. Is drop something that you really factor in? Because it's not something I particularly put a lot of weight in whenever I'm factoring in and looking at wide receivers coming into the NFL.
No, I don't put a huge amount of weight onto that. Matt Harmon actually had a really good article on that. If you guys check that out, how we have that preconceived notion, because there's some receivers that had drops that had really successful NFL careers. I think it's when they really can't catch much of anything, and it really affects their confidence and their ability to bounce back after a drop. I didn't really see that from Fuller, but there are some receivers that you did see that in, like a Braylon Edwards, where his confidence just continually went down, versus someone like T.O. that dropped it, but he still wanted the ball the next time and then would catch it.
Yeah. And we'll kind of bounce back to the Redskins. You have two guys in Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon that are pretty much the top guys on the outside, and now you see them draft Josh Doctson. So Dotson's a guy who's a little bit older than some of the other prospects. As a Redskins fan, I'm actually pretty pumped about the pick. I like Josh Doctson. He's big, athletic, blew up the combine, and I think this is going to kind of open the offense up a bit more, and you're going to see maybe a little bit more out of Kirk Cousins and see this offense kind of open up. What do you think about this pick?
Wow, I think that's an unbelievable pick, especially because, as we were talking about earlier, that's exactly what you need. You need that because he can run that slant route and use his body. I love Josh Doctson, and I like him for the reasons I think a lot of people don't really recognize. He's a huge competitor. Like, I know he's skinny, and I know he can catch good jump balls and stuff, but he fights after the catch. Like, he wants to catch that ball and gain those extra yards. And in that, that quick-hitting scheme that Jay Gruden has, I think that's a perfect fit. And like you said, that's going to help out Deshaun. It's going to help out Garçon, Jordan Reed, Cousins. It even could help out the running game, too. So, take a lot of pressure off of there and some big running lanes for Matt Jones or whomever you guys have.
Yeah, Dotson's a guy that I really, really like, especially in this offense. I think it gives the Redskins some wiggle room. And I think as you see with this pick, you're going to see more defined roles. You have Deshaun Jackson as the deep threat. You have Pierre Garçon, who seemed like he would never have too big of a game. He would do just kind of enough to not really push you over the top, but not really hurt you whenever he did score, like the touchdowns and all. You also have the rookie they got last year out of Duke, going ahead and playing in that slot. And Josh Doctson comes in, and he's an outside guy now. I mean, he's somebody, you look at Matt Harmon's numbers, to me, and the way I looked at Matt Harmon's numbers. It seemed like Josh Dotson was one of the top wide receivers, if not number two, as far as when you look at Matt Harmon's reception perception, and that's just the way that I kind of viewed things. So pick and dynasty wise, I think he's a guy that is going to shoot up to the top 5 of a lot of people's boards.
Yeah, I mean, Doxson's my number 1 wide receiver in this class. And the other part, I think, is as 14-team Mocker had said earlier, Jordan Reed and Kirk Cousins had something going on, you know what I mean, during that last stretch there, and especially in the red zone. Well, Deshaun Jackson isn't great in the red zone, and they needed someone else, and that's what Doxson's good at. So now all of a sudden you can't double one and you have the other one. So that's really going to help both of them out, especially when Garcon starts to leave. He's getting a little bit older, and I don't know, Deshaun Jackson's shelf life. But you certainly have Josh Doxson and Kirk Cousins as a pair that could be, a force to be reckoned with for a while. Man, I really like that pick. That was a smart pick in my opinion. Good value too.
Yeah, and as we look at Josh Dotson's numbers here, the thing is you have a lot of weapons on that field now. If they can get the running game straight, which they struggled with last year, who are you really going to pay your attention to? I mean, you have Deshaun Jackson going deep, you've got Josh Dotson, you've got Reed, and they added a second tight end so that they can't. Vernon Davis might still have a little juice in it left in the tank, and I think the rotation and the number of different formations that they're going to be able to throw at you is going to be interesting next year.
So one question actually for you is what do you picture from that running game now? So since you're a Washington fan, I'd just like to kind of pick your mind there.
I like Matt Jones, but because of the fumbles, I think there's still going to be a lot that he has to go ahead and improve before you can just go ahead and wholeheartedly hand the reins over to him. I think they're going to attempt to as much as possible, but I see them getting another running back later on in this draft. One of the names that I've heard come up, and some people in the scouting community and draft community, especially in the fantasy football community, have different views on them. I haven't heard a lot of good things come out from people about Alex Collins out of Arkansas, but he's the guy that I'm hearing kind of that the Redskins are interested in. He was a top running back coming out of high school. A lot of people were after him out of high school. And he had 1,000-yard rushing seasons for Arkansas. So I think he's a guy that kind of fits in the Chris Ivory type of mold. He's going to get what's blocked for him. He's got pretty good vision. I mean, he follows it well. So it wouldn't shock me to see them maybe go that route and back up Matt Jones with another guy that has a similar type of style and bell cow type of role. Chris Thompson's, I think, going to fill that third down back that they've kind of been looking for. And he's another guy that down stretch, he played very well when he wasn't injured last year.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I'm not super high on Collins, but he was productive. I mean, he was a marked man at Arkansas because they definitely didn't have a whole lot else there. I'm higher on his teammate Jonathan Williams, who didn't even play at all last year. But I mean, you said it. I mean, he has really, really good vision, and his instincts are pretty well. I think he's, the combine showed he's a below-average athlete. I saw that too. I don't think he's super great with power. He kind of gets what's blocked for him, as you said, but you're not going to get him in round 2 or round 3. You're going to get him 4 or 5, and it's going to be a decent value. There's a lot of backs that they could get. They could pair together and at least get by for a couple of years, unless they went with someone like Henry or Dixon in round 2 or round 3.
So as we kind of switch gears away from the Redskins and talk about Minnesota, I mean, you look at the receiving core, what they had last year. Stephon Diggs had a nice little stretch, but couldn't really keep it together for the whole season. Charles Johnson is a guy that I got burned on last year. I was kind of expecting him to be a kind of breakout guy, and if you look at his metrics and a lot of the things in his profile, you thought that was going to happen. It didn't happen. Is this maybe the spot where we see Laquon Treadwell?
Man, I've had this talk with a lot of people, and this has been the pick that's been mocked to them, right, has been Treadwell to Minnesota to help out Teddy. And I'm just not really sure that's exactly what Minnesota needs. I mean, when you look at that team, it's a run, play action with Teddy. I know Diggs had a decent little stint there. I mean, isn't that what kind of Charles Johnson was, right? He's supposed to be that kind of bigger guy that can do a little bit. I know he can fill that need, but in my opinion, I mean, if you're going to be what Minnesota wants, isn't an offensive lineman going to help out them as well and help assist Adrian Peterson almost more than a Treadwell would, at least for the last 1 or 2 years of his career there?
So who's the pick you like right here?
That's a good one. The one guy I've been mocking to them, and again, I don't know if this is a round 2 pick more for them. I really like Josh Garnett, the guard for Stanford. He's a complete road grader. They need a guard really bad, and I think, I mean, if you get him in front of AP, that's only going to help him out more. And McKinnon, I like McKinnon as well, and also protect Teddy. So I don't know if it's a good value pick, but that's just one gut feeling that I've had for a while, that they would just keep building on that line. Put him next to big old Phil Lodeholt, you know what I mean? You're going to be moving some guys on defense.
From a dynasty perspective, how do you value Adrian Peterson right now? And if you had to trade Adrian Peterson away, what would you expect in return for him?
It's a really good question. Honestly, unless you're a contender, I think that you shouldn't even mess around with Adrian Peterson. He got a lot of touches last year. He's starting to lose his efficiency. And so in a dynasty setting, that'd be the only reason I would keep him. If you can't get good value, I would keep him at least maybe a couple weeks into the season and then try to deal him. What I would look to get him, I would look for 2017 first-round picks. I know that's been the buzzword. I just did the DLF Dynasty pod with Jeff Miller talking about it. I mean, that is a completely loaded class from not only a running back perspective. I like the wide receivers better than this year. I like the tight ends and quarterbacks better. So I would shoot for probably a 2017 first and second probably to try and get Peterson. And I don't care if it's projected late or not. I mean, there's going to be some good players there.
So Minnesota goes wide receiver Laquon Treadwell. So the guy we were just talking about, and we just discussed how we thought he fit. And what do you really think about it? You said you didn't think that was the guy that they should go after, and here we are.
Yeah, maybe look at Josh Garnett in round 2, redeem me a little bit there, but I think Treadwell can maybe overcome a little bit of Teddy's arm strength concerns, hopefully. But he's going to be, that possession type of guy. So, nothing deep. I think that's where Teddy's not great at. He's definitely going to help in the run game. So that's the other part of his thing, is how he can block. He can really hurt on some DBs and then try and pick off another linebacker or peel back and get another guy. So that's another hidden value of Treadwell here. I certainly think it's good value, better than Will Fuller was 2 picks ago. I just don't know where I see his ceiling at. Do you know what I mean, Scott? As far as in a redraft or even in a dynasty, I don't know how great Treadwell can be when he's paired with Teddy.
Does this boost Teddy Bridgewater in your opinion?
I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a high-end QB2 maybe for his ceiling for his career. So I think it's certainly going to help him, but I don't know if it's going to help a whole lot. I'm also not super, super high on Treadwell, so I might be the worst guy to ask about this.
Yeah, Treadwell's a guy that I'm not high on either. I just don't think you saw enough out of him in college that he can actually carry a passing attack. And one of the articles that they had up on RotoViz compared him to Dante Moncrief, and he kind of fails in comparison. He's very close production-wise to Dante Moncrief, but Dante Moncrief is just the superior athlete. And I just don't know if all the draft analysts talk of blocking and all that other stuff is really going to transfer to the fantasy football realm that we kind of play in.
No, I agree with you, because, at some point, you want to see it with a player. I know with Amari Cooper, we saw a little bit of his freshman year. He got hurt a little bit his sophomore year, and then his junior, we saw the superstar dominant player that took over, a team. We never saw that with Treadwell. We saw bits and flashes here or there. When we saw Alshon Jeffrey at South Carolina, we saw him completely take over. We didn't see it with Treadwell, and that's the part that scares me, is if you don't see it in college, when are you eventually going to see it? You're just hoping on some potential.
So we want to go ahead and welcome Matthew Friedman back on. Matt, what do you think about the Treadwell pick to Minnesota?
More than the pick of the team, I think it's really intriguing that he went after Fuller, especially after Fuller and after Doxson. That was pretty surprising, and that he went in the 20s. I was thinking maybe in the late teens, maybe even as early as 14 14, something like that. But specifically with the Vikings, it's I think it'll be interesting, and I think as Nick was saying, I think he will help Teddy Bridgewater. I think that's what the pick was basically about. It was intended to help out a young quarterback who really didn't get the help he probably needed last year. Like that bigger body type of guy. I don't think he has a high likelihood of being a wide receiver 1 for multiple seasons. He might touch low end wide receiver 1 status at some point, but I think he does have a pretty good chance of being sort of like a Keenan Allen-esque type of wide receiver 2, like a dependable wide receiver 2 for a number of years.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the card for Treadwell loaded up. One of the comparisons that John had for Treadwell was Michael Crabtree. Do y'all think that that's a fair comparison? Is what y'all kind of see him as?
Nick, what do you think?
No, I think that's fair because I think Crabtree wasn't as good of an athlete as people first imagined him. He is a decent route runner. I think Treadwell doesn't get enough credit for his route running. I know he could use his hands better to get separation from DBs and gets rerouted at times, but I think that he can settle in zones well. I think he's smart that way, and he's physical, and that's exactly what Crabtree was. And we know he's decent after the catch, which is Crabtree was, classic for those screens and coming in the middle of the field. So I can definitely see that. I know earlier it was the Dez comparisons and the Alshon Jeffries, but I don't know that he quite has those ball skills that those guys have.
Yeah, one of the things that go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think in terms of the style of game, he probably has some Crabtree. I think the big difference clearly is that Crabtree was, I think, around 207 pounds when he entered the NFL, and Treadwell is 220-ish. So I think even if they have similar styles, I think the benefit, the extra size that Treadwell has, and then the fact that he's younger than Crabtree was entering the league, I think those are things in his favor. But in terms of the way that they play, I think it's similar in that they're not the type of players who run away from guys. They tend to make contested catches, and so I could see him being sort of the best case version of what people maybe hoped Crabtree would be able to be in the NFL.
Yeah, one of the things that I hate to do as an analyst and when I'm breaking down players is I hate to get hung up on any one stat. And I'm looking at things, and for Treadwell to be the big receiver and that he is, the 33.5-inch vertical that you see kind of concerns me. And I try to balance out his lack of athleticism, his lack of production, and then you go back to some of the work that John Moore's done with the Phenom Index and everything, and then you look at the fact that he's only 20. And I try to figure out where is the balance for him, and especially when you look at film. And I'm not the biggest film guy, but when I do look at it, I don't see him making any separation. I have to wonder how much his body and how much his style is going to help him in the NFL and in the red zone with a 33.5-inch vertical.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Scott. When I watch film of him, there are times when I see some burst with the route running. I think, and this is really weird, and you'll see this with some players, I think Treadwell's a faster player without the ball in his hands than with the ball in his hands. And I don't know why that is. And some guys it doesn't affect them at all, or they're reverse. But you're right, with the separation, I think there's times when he kind of plays down to his competition a little bit even with there's a Boise State game where he looks like he just completely dominated and stuff. I didn't really see him separating from a Boise State corner a whole lot either. He kind of pushed him around, but that's not going to be the case at the NFL level. So kind of to your question, is he going to be able to get more explosive? It's possible. I wouldn't promise that. You know what I mean? I don't know if it was the foot a little bit. Maybe the foot delayed him, kind of excelling or progressing physically. But, he is only 20. Calvin Ridley's 22 at Bama right now, so there's more hope for Treadwell.
Guys, I'm going to throw a question out to both of y'all. With the wide receivers that have been drafted, you saw Will Fuller go, you saw Dotson go, you saw Treadwell go, and Coleman to the Browns. Where do you guys kind of rank these guys now that you have a team to go with a player? And do you think any one guy kind of jumped the back?
I still have Coleman number one. I don't think it's a fantastic fit. I wish he had, like a quarterback, but I like that he went ahead of the other guys. I like the opportunity that he has. Like he's the wide receiver there. I still like Doxson. I think I would still have Treadwell ahead of Fuller, but for me, there's Coleman, and then based on landing spots, there's a pretty decent gap between Coleman and the other three guys. But I wouldn't mind getting any of those guys in a rookie draft. Like I think all of them have potential. The one guy I guess would be Fuller. I guess there is the question of how many targets is he realistically going to get with Hopkins as the target hog in Houston. But I still think Fuller has potential.
What about you, Nick?
That's a really tough question. I hate to just kind of agree and hop on with Matt there, but I mean it's tough to envision a super high ceiling, because here's the other part is, does it take away from how many targets Hopkins is going to get there in Houston?
I don't think it does. I think Hopkins is still going to be the guy. So then it's like, is it sort of just like a vanity pick? Like, hey, we have a great second receiver that we're never going to throw the ball to. Or are they going to change the offensive philosophy a little bit, run the ball a little bit less, and look to throw a little bit more now that they have their franchise quarterback in Brock Osweiler? Maybe, but that doesn't seem like a great recipe for success either. I like Fuller, and I still think that he will have those sort of splash games. I just don't know if he will be a really reliable player.
Yeah. One of the interesting things for me throughout this whole process is I just don't agree with the contract that Osweiler got, and I don't know with what I saw out of the Denver offense last year. You kind of have two similar receivers now. I would kind of put Will Fuller in a similar role to what you saw out of Emmanuel Sanders last year, and you can kind of put DeAndre Hopkins as a similar wide receiver to Demaryius Thomas, and he couldn't thrive last year, especially with the defense that he had, and I just didn't think that I got consistent enough numbers out of Brock Osweiler, and I have to wonder if that's really going to help if he can make the decisions enough to be able to force-feed DeAndre Hopkins the ball, or if he's going to have a little bit too much to process to where he's just a safe quarterback and not really putting up the numbers that you need to help.
Yeah. I'm not. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, I think the situation with Osweiler, it's very precarious, and so they paid him like a franchise quarterback. I think even when he struggles, they're going to continue to use him. I don't think he showed exceptional decision making with the Broncos last year, and granted, it was a small sample, and so it's always like the question of like, is that random or is it representative? But I think because Hopkins is a bigger target and will probably be running routes, I'm imagining running routes closer to the line of scrimmage than Will Fuller will be running, that I think Hopkins would probably be sort of like his default go-to if he's forcing the ball to somebody. But I don't know. I think with him, it's a little uncertain because we still don't have a strong glimpse of like his decision-making process.
I don't agree with the Brock Osweiler one, and when that pick came up, the contract, I wasn't, super high in him anyway. But I think the one thing to keep in mind with him is he's in a way he's kind of like Carson Wentz. He doesn't have a ton of NFL starts. I don't think he had a ton of starts really in college either. I think he was 2 years in a JUCO. Am I right there? So in a way, we don't know exactly what the finished product is there. And I guess giving him more weapons gives him a better opportunity because now he has Lamar Miller. Now he has, obviously we know Hopkins is really good. 14-team mocker liked Strong a little bit more than I did. Now you have Fuller. Really, there's no excuse for him not to continue to develop this year and next year. I don't know if he's going to live out the whole life of that contract. I would doubt it because I think he's going to fall. But I think, this gives him the best opportunity, kind of in the way of I'm trying to think of some of the other teams where they just keep surrounding them with weapons. That's how you're going to see what the finished product is versus Brady was in some of those years when he only had like Troy Brown, for instance.
Guys, just to give a quick update, we've had 2 picks go by. Cincinnati selected William Jackson, the defensive back out of Houston, and Pittsburgh selected Artie Burns, which puts Denver on the clock at 26, and the pick's supposed to be coming in pretty quickly. Without either one of those 2 defensive backs really making a difference fantasy-wise, is Denver going to go with Lynch, or what do y'all see happening here at 26?
I mean, I think they have to go quarterback. I mean, that would make the most sense unless they wanted to move up and get someone like Miles Jack. Like someone finally wants to take that bullet. I haven't heard any more news on Sam Bradford to them or Colin Kaepernick to them. My favorite pick for them was Cardale Jones, so I don't know if that's going to come to light here with Paxton Lynch still on the board.
Yeah, I have to say it's kind of incredible to me that Lynch lasted this long. Not that I think that highly of him, but that I expected the quarterback fever at some point to kind of set in and that someone would take him. And I have to say I'm really impressed with the Browns with continuing to trade down and then to get a good player at a position of need while still accumulating picks. I was really impressed that they didn't take the bite on Lynch. Because I think any other year or other teams in comparable positions needing a quarterback, seeing a guy there, kind of like I think he's the clear 3rd quarterback just in the way that most people are probably thinking of quarterbacks, like above all of the others. And so I could see a team in years past looking at him, seeing that he's the only quarterback left on the board and taking the plunge. So really impressed with them not taking Lynch. And so with him left on the board, maybe the Broncos take him. The thing is, I think the Broncos have been pretty focused on trying to find or explore opportunities for other quarterbacks because they're not enamored with some of the quarterbacks in this class, and that's just conjecture. But it wouldn't surprise me if they did take Lynch, but I kind of doubt that they do. Just because I think that I don't want to say I think they're smarter than that because they did draft Brock Osweiler in the 2nd round and then not do anything with him for basically 4 years. But I will be. I think I don't know. I don't expect it to happen, but at the same time, that really is the huge position that they need addressed. So you never know. But again, if they draft him, I don't see them starting him right away either, which is why I kind of don't even see them drafting him in the first place.
And Nick, we'll go ahead and get your reaction. As it turns out, Denver sends a 3rd rounder to Seattle, and they take Paxton Lynch.
I mean, I like Paxton Lynch. I think he's a lot closer to Carson Wentz than Carson Wentz was to Jared Goff, in my opinion, in my evaluation. So he doesn't need to start right away. I think that you could kind of go a little bit with Mark Sanchez and just let him sit a little bit. I think Lynch made some big strides when I watched him at his pro day, just because his offense was a little bit different at Memphis than kind of what he's going to run in the NFL. But when you think about it this way, his arm is better than what Peyton had last year in Denver. So, he's got some really, really good receivers. I like Manny Sanders a lot more than I think a lot of people. And Demaryius is still really good. So, I think that pick can only help those players. I know a lot of people think they're not as smart as Manning, but Peyton Manning also had a 69 quarterback rating last year. So I don't know if it could get really any worse.
Nick, I want to go ahead and thank you for joining us. I know we kept you over a little bit, but it was worth it being that Denver went ahead and picked Paxton Lynch. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can follow your work at and what they can check you out on next.
Yeah, Dynasty League Football. I got 2 pods going on there, Phil Metrics and the DLF Dynasty Pod, and @_ Nick Whalen on Twitter. I appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
So, Matt, aside from my beard envy that I have looking at you, because I can't grow a beard, I'm beard handicapped here. So, What do you think overall as far as the pick of Paxton Lynch? Does this start to make a lot of sense and clear some of the air as far as the rumors and where the chips are going to start falling out? It seems like Kaepernick's going to be stuck in San Francisco. We still don't know what the Jets are going to be doing. They obviously passed up. We talked a little bit earlier that Christian Hackenberg may be the guy that the Jets want. You still have Connor Cook floating around out there. How do you think this kind of clears up things, or does it make even more of a mess out of everything for you?
I don't know if it really clears anything up because, again, I mean, why I didn't think Paxton Lynch was going to go to the Broncos is because I don't think he's a first-year starter. And if you are the Broncos and you're looking to get something fixed in your quarterback position, I imagine that you would probably want to take a guy who's going to start right away. But I look at Connor Cook and I look at Hackenberg, and I don't think either one of those guys is going to start the first year either. So, I mean, I guess those teams could, like the Jets, for instance, could take one of those guys, and in theory it addresses the quarterback position, but it doesn't really address the quarterback position because they still have to have someone start this year. And whoever it is who is going to start doesn't seem like a really satisfactory person to guide the team. So I'm not really enamored of the Paxton Lynch pick, and I'm not enamored of the other options that teams could look toward in the future. So I think we're just kind of in this situation, and who knows what the Browns are going to do. Maybe they roll with one of the guys that they have on the roster now, but that's a really interesting situation that they decided to bypass the quarterback position. I think it was probably a good move, but at this point they do have a lot of uncertainty at that position.
Yeah, so Paxton Lynch's player card up there. You look at the comps that we have on there, Dante Culpepper and Blaine Gabbert, and you're talking about Denver wanting to wait to go with them, and it looks like they're going to be rolling with Mark Sanchez. Do you see Paxton Lynch as more on the Dante Culpepper side or more on the Blaine Gabbert side?
Man, I mean, I think it's a little bit. I mean, I guess maybe. Man, that's hard, that's so hard to say. I don't see him being Dante Culpepper, and maybe I'm just sort of thinking of like the best case scenario, and that's what Dante Culpepper seems like he would be, is Paxton Lynch's best case scenario. I see him as a little more of a Blaine Gabbert, and Gabbert was a decent runner in college, and Paxton Lynch has some running capability. I think he's probably a little more on the Blaine Gabbert side. At the same time, like, I don't think he will turn out to be as bad as Blaine Gabbert, because almost no one turns out to be as bad as Blaine Gabbert. I think he's got a strong arm. I think and especially like with his height, I think he's sort of like a little bit of Joe Flacco, like a little bit of Brock Osweiler, like 6'7", like that's serious height. And we've just started within the last 10 years to see quarterbacks on something of a regular basis who approach that height. Osweiler being one of those guys. He just seems to me like another Osweiler.
Yeah. And you talk about just recent years we've started to see. It seems like the first really tall quarterback that I can remember was Scott Mitchell playing for Detroit back in the day. I mean, he was the only guy. I want to say he was like 6'8" or something. I don't really recall anybody else being, really taller than like 6'4", 6'5" here and there. You might have had one or two people, but Scott Mitchell was the first guy that was kind of tall and had that big windup, and he was nothing great. So it is kind of interesting to see some of these taller prospects coming out. So we'll shift gears a little bit. The Packers are on the clock. How do you see them going, especially with the offense and what we saw last year? Jeff Janis, is he going to get more time this coming year? Is Jordan Nelson going to be able to come back from injury? You saw the team struggle. Eddie Lacy, who apparently has lost quite a bit of weight and is in shape now that he's doing some MMA training. What do you think the Packers are going to do? Do they go offense? Do they go defense? And how do you see them for 2016?
Well, so I don't think they're going to go for any of the skill positions, right? Like, I don't see them going for wide receiver. That's a position they don't really need to address. I don't see them going running back either, obviously. I mean, are they going to get Derrick Henry and be like, hey, Eddie Lacy, we have a new version of you, and he's much better? But I think it will probably be like offensive line or defense, and I have no idea where on the defense. I think they probably couldn't go wrong with getting a linebacker or someone for the defensive line, but not really sure who that would be. I just know that I think they are pretty set on defense. I hope, on offense in terms of their skill position players. I hope that Janis does get some more action. And I think, the ACL injury is not incredibly difficult to come back from. But the thing is, like, when guys come back from it, they come back at sort of like that 80% level for that first 6 months, the first year. So even if Jordy Nelson is back, I think he's going to be not like a shell of himself, but just sort of like a version of himself that's always like questionable. Like in years past, if Jordy Nelson was playing in a game and he was injured but he was still playing, I think that's sort of like the version of Jordy Nelson that we're going to see. And so I think that will necessitate getting Jeff Janis involved more on a regular basis. Some of that might come a little bit at the expense of Jordy Nelson. I think a lot of that will come at the expense of Devontae Adams, who just really didn't show anything last year, even though he had a great opportunity. So I think Janis will take a step forward, but there might be the kind of thing where with 4 mouths to feed, no one really gets fed sufficiently. And that's not even taking into account passes to running backs or passes to the tight end position. So I think Jeff Janis will take a step forward, and I think that will sort of mean that the other 3 wide receivers take steps backward a little bit.
Does Randall Cobb bounce back in your opinion? I was quite disappointed in his production this year. I really underestimated exactly how much of a difference Jordy Nelson made to Randall Cobb's performance. I thought he would be able to perform a little bit. And as far as from a dynasty perspective, what do you see, what kind of forecast do you have for Ty Montgomery getting more involved? I actually wish they would use him in the backfield a little bit more as a runner.
Oh, really? Randall Cobb as a runner? Yeah, I don't think using him as a runner would hurt their running game at all.
Well, I'm talking about Ty Montgomery as a runner.
Yeah. And, Randall Cobb, I think he will take a step forward. I think having Jordy Nelson back and incorporating Jeff Janis more into the offense will help Randall Cobb. I think last year was something of a worst-case scenario for him. Like, there were just times when that offense really could not get going, and that hurts. I think that hurts Cobb the most, because I think he thrives best in those situations where the offense is really on a roll. The defense has to guard against the wide receivers on the outside who are stretching the field, and that gives Cobb a lot of ability to roam the middle of the field and to get like the ball quickly in space and be able to do his thing. So I think he will rebound. I think this offense in general will just be better moving forward. And I don't know how much of that actually has to do with Jordy Nelson returning. I think that helps, but I think it's just that the offense was not as good last year as, like, if you ran simulations, as good as they would be, 8 times out of 10 without Jordy Nelson. I think there were just a lot of other things going against them, one of which was Eddie Lacy's regression to mediocrity.
Yeah, the Green Bay Pickets they actually picked nose tackle Kenny Clark out of UCLA. He's the guy that was highly touted coming out of high school there, and he's a guy that, if you look at his metrics and some of the comparisons they have over at Mock Draftable, he's a guy that could really do some damage there for a defensive tackle. That was going to go ahead and bring us to the Chiefs being on deck, but they've actually made a trade with San Francisco. So is this the spot that we see another quarterback come off the board?
I don't know. I didn't think Paxton Lynch was going to go when he did, so I should basically just keep my mouth shut. But, if it is a quarterback, you really have to wonder who it is. I don't feel as if I could have any sort of accurate guess on what type of quarterback Chip Kelly would want in San Francisco. If for no other reason than I haven't been able to figure out the past 2 years who it is that Chip Kelly would decide to play in Philadelphia.
How is it that Colin Kaepernick is not the perfect quarterback for Chip Kelly's system, and what he did at Oregon, and what he seemingly wants to do in the NFL? Like if they draft a quarterback here, what happens with Kaepernick?
I have no idea, because the thing is, they lost, one of their main trade partners, or at least, a potential trade partner in Denver, who just drafted their quarterback. So it seems like they are sort of stuck with Kaepernick, especially, he's under contract now. So I don't think there's going to be a team that takes the money. So they would have to be trading him away and be willing to pay a lot of his salary, which just seems crazy. So, who knows if they're taking a wide receiver, a quarterback. They have so many needs on that team that I could see them really trading up for almost anybody.
Yeah, this one should be interesting. Especially with the wide receivers that they have there in San Francisco. I like their first pick with DeForest Buckner. I think DeForest Buckner is one of the better players in the draft, especially when you talk about a safe pick early on. For San Francisco here, you really have to wonder, and I can't say that I have all that much confidence in the GM there and Chip Kelly making this pick that it's going to be anything worth what they traded up for.
Yeah. So what cracks me up is Chip Kelly entered the situation in San Francisco saying that he absolutely did not want to be a GM. He didn't want to have decision-making power. And then the pick of DeForest Buckner, even though I think it was probably like a very justifiable pick, like that feels so much like a Chip Kelly pick. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, of course you took a guy from Oregon, right? It's just, it seems like not much has actually changed. Maybe Balky is giving up a little more of, not the power, but I guess he's allowing the coach to make some suggestions and to influence the decision-making process. But that felt like a very Chip Kelly pick to me. And so I will be curious to see how the rest of the draft plays out, and if the picks feel like Chip Kelly selections.
Yeah, and the picks actually end to go with Joshua Garnett, offensive guard, I think from Stanford. He's a guy that Nick was actually high on and spoke about a little earlier on the show. And it's an offensive lineman. This has to help the running game.
Yeah, my general sense is that you can almost never go wrong by picking an offensive lineman. You know what I mean? It's not a sexy pick, but it's a pick where you can say, look, we are investing in the future of this team. We're going to protect our quarterback. We're going to run the ball. But it does seem weird to trade up for a guard. I don't know exactly what they had to give up to get him, but it's a justifiable pick. A guy who can help you with both in the run game and the passing game is a guy worth having.
So it doesn't seem like Carlos Hyde has a lot of competition there in San Francisco. With what I saw in Chip Kelly in Philadelphia, with the whole DeMarco Murray debacle of the type of running plays that they wanted him to run, I don't understand how Carlos Hyde is a much different player as far as being able to run those plays. The other thing that kind of concerns me with next year and Carlos Hyde is game flow going to really be a damper on Carlos Hyde and what type of numbers he can put up. Even with the offensive guard pick and offensive line help, what's your kind of projection and how do you see Carlos Hyde going into next year?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So with him, I think there are certain teams where the projection right now is still so uncertain because you're wondering okay, who's the quarterback going to be? How what kind of moves will they make that improve the game flow, improve their chances of winning games, and putting the running back in a position to get a few more carries each game. Carlos Hyde, I think, has the potential to be a solid running back too. But again, the game flow, as you mentioned, will be very uncertain, especially if they don't do anything with the quarterback position. And Chip Kelly sort of does what he's done the last 2 years, going back and forth between the quarterbacks and never really deciding which horse he's going to ride. And I think that can really be something that is detrimental to the offensive system as a whole. So I think he has a chance of running back 2 production, but I could see it being very inconsistent and maybe beneficial for people who like to play in tournaments in daily fantasy sports, but for people who just kind of want to have a steady running back 2 who gets regular production, I don't think he's going to be that type of player for them.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and put Arizona on the clock. Arizona is absolutely loaded on offense. We have a lot of production on David Johnson. He's a guy that a lot of people love. Do you think there's any chance in 2016 that you see a little bit of a drop-off and some regression, or do you think Arizona's just going to ride David Johnson all year long?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So I think the offense was overperforming at certain points. Like, I think it's a good offense. You know what I mean? But I think they had some spots where the offense just got a lot of things right that maybe they won't get right this year. And I think David Johnson will be the workhorse, but I think he will have game flow that isn't quite as good, and that doesn't hurt him as much because he is a fantastic receiver out of the backfield. So I think he is somewhat, I guess, game flow independent. I think he will still be able to get a lot of production, but at the same time, he had 13 all-purpose touchdowns last year. Like, even if the offense in Arizona does well, and even if he is the workhorse, 13 touchdowns is still a lot for a running back to get 2 years in a row. So, it is possible that he could be the guy there. I think he will be the one who gets the touches. It's just a question of whether he will actually be able to turn those touches into 13 touchdowns. The yards, I think he will far surpass the sort of 1,000 and 50 yards, something like that he got last year. I think he will surpass that easily. I just don't think he will approach 13 touchdowns. I think 10 touchdowns is more realistic.
Yeah. How do you sort out that wide receiving core? Because you saw Larry Fitzgerald have an amazing season last year. You have John Brown, who that was your guy that you called from the get-go. And then you also go ahead and you're looking at things, and it's Michael Floyd with the stretch that he had towards the end of the year. And the coaching staff there thought that they said they expected him to have 1,300 yards if he wasn't injured at the beginning of the season. From a fantasy standpoint, who do you put the most stock in moving forward? Is it John Brown?
So the thing with Fitz was that he did have a great season in the aggregate. If you're looking at the total number of statistics at the end of the season, but he did get a lot of that production in a few spots, and then he was just not bad, but he was just average in his other games. And I think you will continue to have to pay up for Fitz in certain leagues, and I don't think I will be willing to pay that price for him. I think if you're in a dynasty league and you have Fitz, I think you keep him because I don't think you're really going to be able to trade. I don't think you're going to be able to get the value in a trade that he inherently has in terms of his production, in terms of the potential that he has. John Brown, I think, is a very volatile wide receiver 3, and I don't mind having those guys on my team because my belief is that if the rest of my team is decent, they will be able to make up for the games when he is a little underperforming, and then there will be those games each year where he just massively overperforms, and I feel like that can really, give my lineup some juice. Floyd is, I think, similar to Brown in that volatility, but I think he does have more potential in terms of he could be consistent if they just decide to give him the ball a little more often and not use him on the deep patterns the way that they were doing a lot last year. I think if they want to use him in a Larry Fitzgerald type of way, he could be Larry Fitzgerald in terms of moving in the middle of the field and being successful, but I think he could also be very good as a more intermediate to deep route runner if he's not running those routes all of the time. So I would tend to fade Fitz and go a little heavier on Brown and Floyd, and basically whichever one of those guys is cheapest in a draft will probably be the one that I end up owning the most of.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And the pick for Arizona is actually in Robert Nkemdiche from Ole Miss, a guy that if you watch Alabama play Ole Miss last year, he wrecked. I mean, a lot of the SEC, but he's hot, he's cold, but talent-wise, he's there. If some of these guys, I mean, you saw a guy like the Honey Badger. He went there and got his stuff together. You know, Patrick Peterson on that defense. That defense has a lot of talent there now with the addition of Robert Nkemdiche. And that's going to bring us to the last two picks. We've got Carolina on the clock now and Seattle with the trade to the Broncos going ahead and finishing it out the last pick in the first round. What are you expecting out of these next two picks?
Not much. I mean, I'm thinking they'll sort of be like the sort of like the meat and potatoes type of picks of I don't see it being anything flashy. Like I don't see Carolina going for a high wide receiver, like for the third year in a row. I don't really see them addressing the running back position. So I think it's probably going to be something on the offensive line or maybe defensive line. Who knows? Maybe they look to address the defensive back position. To try to shore that up, but I don't really expect anything that will be super fantasy relevant for either of those picks. In thinking of Seattle, I don't really see them addressing the wide receiver position, if for no other reason than right now I don't know who it is that they would think about drafting at this spot at the wide receiver position. I don't see them going running back here. I could see them going, again, either offensive line or going on the defensive side of the ball, defensive line specifically to try to address some of the holes that they have there.
How do you see things shaking out as far as Carolina with their wide receivers? I mean, is Kelvin Benjamin, now that he's finally got some other people beside him where I don't see him totally being the target hog that he was his rookie year, and as inefficient as he was with the targets that he did see. I mean, is Devin Funchess going to take that step? I don't know that Ted Ginn's the guy. I think Ted Ginn fits the role in that offense that he does. It amazes me how many balls that he drops when he's got somebody burnt by 10 yards. But is Devin Funchess going to take a step forward, or do you kind of see Kelvin Benjamin coming back and retaining that number one wide receiver setting for him over there in Carolina?
Yeah, so I think the injury that K. Benji had really set him back. Not so much because of anything that he would have lost physically, because it's not that he was really running by guys in the first place. He was really getting it done with the body position and just being bigger than everyone else. But I think that missed year really prevented him from being able to build on what he had his rookie year. And as you mentioned, he was very inefficient, was still able to get a lot of production despite the inefficiency. But I think having a second year with Cam Newton would have helped him become a more efficient receiver. I think moving forward, Funchess will start to eat into Kelvin Benjamin's production, but I don't think that Funchess will ever be able to overtake Benjamin completely. So I think we will be stuck with the situation where Ted Ginn gets way too many touchdowns than he probably should, and Kelvin Benjamin and Funchess sort of cannibalize the production that we would hope one of those guys would be able to get to make him, a wide receiver too. So I think we will probably be disappointed with both of those guys this year. And I have to say that if one of those guys becomes the workhorse for the wide receivers, I think it's going to be Funchess instead of Benjamin. And I kind of hate to say that because I like Benjamin and I don't like Funchess, but I think Funchess, he has the physical capability. So it's just a question of whether he can actually put it together.
So I'm going to throw something at you, and this is the landing spot that I was most excited about. The player that I most wanted to see Carolina draft is Derrick Henry. And I just think about and imagine, you see Carolina in their defense, and in the fourth quarter, you have Cam Newton and Derrick Henry running the read option. Is this something you would love to see?
Yeah, I would love to see that. And the thing is, Jonathan Stewart, years ago, when he entered the NFL, he was sort of like a smaller version of Derrick Henry, like, good size, freak athlete. I mean, different in that he, could catch the ball, and I mean, there are differences, but he was a freak athlete. And the idea of having a younger guy who's bigger and still a freak athlete next to Cam Newton, that would be very exciting. Like, I mean, Derrick Henry might be the only running back in the league who is actually basically as big as Cam Newton. That would be pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, just cranking down the clock and grinding teams out some old school football with those two big beasts in Cam Newton and Derrick Henry would be lovely.
Yeah, I mean, they could go an entire quarter without even throwing the ball. Just running the read option every play.
And who knows? I mean, if they did that, the safeties would have to come up. You run some play action, and then you have Ted Ginn getting 20 yards deep past the secondary, dropping balls.
Yeah. Which, the Dolphins know all about that. They saw that for a few years.
Yeah, so it should be interesting. I actually think they're going to end up going defense on that side of the ball. You've got Charles Johnson, who's getting a little bit up there in age. They did just lose Josh Norman. You kind of have Mackenzie Alexander that's sitting around there, still floating around. So I think it's going to be defense, and then who knows with Seattle. They could go the same route.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think both of those teams, it's about just adding a little bit, sort of making patches, not really looking to make a big move, just to sort of bolster what they have in place. Because, I mean, both of those teams are Super Bowl contending teams as they are now. So I think it's not that they're going to really look to make a splash. I think they're just trying to, like, add another, like, brick of the wall that they have already built over the last couple of years.
Yeah, with Carolina, their GM has drafted really smart. They went double defensive tackle a few years ago with Kawan Short and Starlo Tulele, and the way he's building his defense and his team, it seems like he's been very methodical. They have a plan, they have a vision, and especially in a NFC South where it doesn't seem like the other GMs in those divisions have been drafting and making as smart of moves. I kind of see Carolina being a dominant team in that division for years to come, and I think Carolina is going to be a perennial playoff contender year in and year out. And we've kind of seen Cam Newton. He started off really, really hot the first few years, but he was on a steady decline until this past year hit. So it's going to be interesting to me if he can maintain what he did this past year and really be that rock solid top ranked quarterback that you've seen out of him, because his numbers have gone down since his rookie year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there has been weakness in his numbers, but pretty consistently, and especially in his rushing numbers and the number of rushing touchdowns he was getting each year, there was a lot of slippage there, but he was still pretty consistently a top 5 fantasy quarterback for his first 3 years. And then the year before that, he had some injuries. He was in the car accident near the very beginning of the season. That was really kind of like a wasted year for him. And then last year, again, sort of like a top 5 fantasy quarterback. So we have 4 out of 5 seasons with this guy where he's been, a very consistent top 5 quarterback season to season, even if there have been like those mountains and those valleys of production for him over the course of the season, it's still sort of leveled out for top 5 positional production. And so I think that's something pretty similar to what we could see with him again. It's just a question of whether the team can support him so that he can have that type of production, and then whether he sustains an injury or not. Because I think the injury is really the thing that set him back in his 4th season.
Yeah, and the pick for Carolina is actually in. It's Vernon Butler, another defensive tackle out of Louisiana Tech. He's got a little bit of versatility, can kick out to the defensive end, play a little bit of that, a big run stuffer there. So that's going to put Seattle, and it's saying that the pick is in for Seattle and kind of bring us towards the end of the draft.
God, those defensive tackles, we went on a defensive tackle run right there.
Yeah, so With Seattle, Doug Baldwin, does he continue what he did last year? Where do you see the drop off? How is he going to come back to earth? I mean, Doug Baldwin cost me tons of money. I mean, I had leagues where I was the top overall team, the top point scorer the whole year, and then we get to the playoffs after my first round bye, and Doug Baldwin single-handedly put 4 of my teams out of the playoffs.
You know, Doug Baldwin is just such an unlikely person. He never really had a big season in college. He's not, he didn't test amazingly well for his size. Undrafted receiver. Didn't really do anything very exceptional for his first few seasons in the league. Like, it's unlikely at any of those steps that guy becomes Doug Baldwin that we saw last year. I'm very hesitant to say that we can see him do the same thing again. At the same time, I'm probably biased because I really like Tyler Lockett, and I would like to see Tyler Lockett have a chance to produce. So I don't think Doug Baldwin will have the production that he had last year. That's just sort of not – like, that production is not in his profile as a player. But I think he will probably come not close to it, but sort of 75% of the production. I think the touchdown rate is unsustainable, right? I don't think he will score that number of touchdowns, but I think the yardage could probably be there. And I don't think it will be sort of like a nice, consistent accumulation of production. I think it will be very volatile in terms of how he accumulates it. But I think the yardage could be there, but the touchdowns won't be there.
Yeah. Where do you stand on Thomas Rawls? Because Thomas Rawls is a guy that you have a very small sample size for what he did last year. Yet in this offseason and in dynasty leagues, Thomas Rawls owners are asking a huge ransom for him. And it's quite interesting to me because I don't think Thomas Rawls owners are getting a lot of offers, yet they're actively trying to trade Thomas Rawls and get something for him. Marshawn Lynch still hasn't gotten his retirement papers in. The last I saw, he was building houses in Haiti, though. So, are you on the Thomas Rawls, train? And if so, where do you see him? Where is his fit, and what is his value? Where do you see him at?
So, I liked Thomas Rawls entering the draft last year. I thought he was undervalued. When he went undrafted, I thought he was undervalued. I liked his chances as the guy who could become a good backup in Seattle. I think he will probably be the guy in Seattle, but do you have an idea of what his ADP is right now in redraft formats?
I do not. Give me a second. I can probably find it out.
It's the type of situation where I like him as a player, but I think that he might be more expensive to roster than I would be interested in paying. So it's a weird situation where I do like him, but he probably won't end up on any of my teams.
Yeah, I think what's being asked of him, it's a lot for what some people are asking. I can't recall some of the trade offers that I've gotten, but I know it was way more than what I would be willing to give up for a guy like him. I think he fits what Seattle wants to do, and I think he's a good replacement for Marshawn Lynch if you're going to have somebody. But is he going to be a consistent RB2? And let's see, Thomas Rawls in MFL 10s, he's going at pick 48. I'm trying to find his redraft, but I don't see his redraft.
Pick 48 actually is not that bad. That's a lot lower than I had kind of imagined it might be. I actually might take him at pick 48.
Yeah,
I think
pick 48. Yeah, pick 48 is something that I could be comfortable with.
Yeah.
But some of these other offers and some of the things that I'd been seeing, it was just absolutely ridiculous. And Seattle actually goes offensive guard Jermaine Ifedi from Texas A&M, so they get a little bit of offensive line help, which could actually help Rawls
I think that makes sense for them to attack offensive line. It was
especially
a shortcoming this last year.
Yeah, especially with some of the pressure and things that you saw with Russell Wilson. With that being said, and the way Russell Wilson had to play last year, do you think Jimmy Graham coming back healthy at whatever his health may be, do you think the offense is going to revert back to what it was, or do you think they ended up having to pass the way they did at the end of the year out of the necessity from losing Marshawn Lynch, having Thomas Rawls go down, and Jimmy Graham being out?
So I hate to say it, but I'm counting Graham as pretty much a zero. Even if he comes back, I don't think he's going to be anything close to the Jimmy Graham of the Saints. And I don't think Seattle showed that they really had a consistent way of using him when he was healthy. I think they probably will throw a little bit more. I think they will continue to run with Rawls, but I think they will go to more of a pass-heavy offense. But I think that has more to do with the emergence of Tyler Lockett as a weapon and the emergence of Russell Wilson as a proven passer. Like, I think he showed last year that he deserves to be more than a sort of souped-up game manager, which is what he really was for his first couple of years in the league. So I'm excited to see what they will do if they let Russell Wilson kind of have more free reign with that offense.
Yeah, and that's gonna wrap up the first round. So I'm gonna go throw a couple of questions at you. What is your favorite pick from a fantasy standpoint of the first round?
So, man, I mean, I don't know. I guess I have to say Ezekiel Elliott because it's sort of like strength going to strength. As a Cowboys fan, I absolutely hate the pick. I would have liked to see something maybe a little more practical, for instance. But from a fantasy perspective, it's a great fit. The thing is, it probably makes him way too overvalued at this point. You know what I mean? Whatever his value was, basically double it. So that's unfortunate, but I think it's a good fit. I also like, from the wide receiver side, I do like Corey Coleman to the Browns. I think he has a lot of potential there because there are just so many targets that he could soak up. And so I don't know what's going to happen with your quarterback position. I think that could be something that's pretty exciting, though. Like, I don't know. Maybe if RG3 actually becomes the quarterback, that could be something really enticing because I think RG3 is better than he's seemed for the last 3 years, which sounds like such a crazy statement. But like, I could see if they run a certain type of offense, how Corey Coleman could really benefit from that offense. So, but just even regardless of that, I think he will get a lot of targets, which is very exciting.
Yeah, it should be interesting. As a Redskins fan, I think RG3's shortcomings are really in being able to read the offense read the defense. And part of the issue that I think he really had was I don't think he ever got confident after the injury and after the way the coaches kind of treat him. I felt like he always kind of felt like he was walking on eggshells. When you're not playing with confidence, it's really going to affect your decision making and what you're doing. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with Hugh Jackson. I actually think McCown's the best quarterback they have there on the roster thus far right now, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them go with McCown again. I just think when it comes to who's going to give them the best chance of winning, I think McCown's that guy. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, A, for the rest of the draft, and B, in the preseason to see what they go with. So that's a team in Cleveland that I think I'm going to have a lot of players from their team on some of my fantasy teams. Duke Johnson's a guy I absolutely love, especially in PPR leagues. So it should be interesting to see how that plays out. And with the defense, I think it's going to be a lot of positive game flow for Duke Johnson and the targets that he'll be able to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should also say I think Doxson in Washington is intriguing. I know that there are some people who really kind of liked the Doxson to AJ Green comparison, and now I think that comparison has a little more meat to it because he will be playing in that offensive system that AJ Green had as a rookie. So I think there will be a lot of targets for him too in Washington. I think either like Deshaun Jackson or Pierre Garçon, one of those guys will be gone, and I think the other guy probably won't be able to get sufficient targets to keep Dawson from being the alpha dog right away. So I do like him in Washington, but I am a little hesitant about the offense. I think he will get the targets. I'm just not sure what those targets will be worth.
Yeah, and with that, who are some of the guys that we got a lot of the guys out of the way, the big wide receivers and stuff. What are you expecting tomorrow? Who do you expect to be the next big offensive guy off of the board? Is it going to be Derrick Henry?
I think so. I mean, maybe I'm just sort of, like looking at the situation through like crimson-colored glasses or something, but I think he is such a rare talent in terms of just like his physical capabilities, but then also the production he accumulated at Alabama. I think he has to go in the second round. I have no idea what team will be taking him. I think that's just, it's really hard to say which team, because there aren't any teams that I look at and I think, oh, they definitely 100% need a running back. There aren't many teams that need a running back, but you have a team like Miami that might take a running back even though they might not actually need one. Like with him, it's just that question of like where do teams start to sort of like think a little bit less about need and maybe a little bit more about best player available who sort of fits a need, like it sort of fits a sort of pretend need. But I think Derrick Henry is a guy who definitely deserves to go in round 2. And it wouldn't surprise me if Leonte Carroo snuck into round 2, although there are other wide receivers, some guys I'm not really high on, like Michael Thomas. Right? I think he will probably go in round 2, but that's not something that really excites me.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you one last question before we kind of wrap this up. Who's one guy that you see in round 2 or round 3 coming off, or even the rest of the draft, that you really want to plant your flag for? A guy that you're really high on that maybe other people might not be as high on for dynasty purposes?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so much of my draft perspective is shaped by like Team RotoViz, but I like Carroo. Like Carroo is a guy that I want. I want him on all of my teams, and CJ Prosise I also want on all of my teams. Like those two guys at the wide receiver and running back position, I would be very happy to get in the second half of the first round, or even if somehow it worked out in in your rookie draft to get them at the top of the second round, however it works out. But Carroo is a guy I absolutely want, almost regardless of whatever team takes him. And the same thing with Prosise. I think even if, like David Johnson last year, there's not a clear path to getting playing time, Prosise is big enough, athletic enough, and good enough as a receiver eventually to get playing time. So I like both of those guys.
Yeah, and I actually would mirror exactly the same thing you said. Prosise is a guy that I like. I would love to see Prosise go to a team like the Saints, a team that actually uses their running backs to go ahead and catch the ball. The Saints weren't very good running the ball, despite what people might have gotten out of Mark Ingram over the year. He was kind of inefficient with a lot of his carries. C.J. Spiller got absolutely nothing out of and just didn't seem like he fit the offense. When they did put him in a game, they didn't get him the ball in space. One or two times that they did, he did something with it, but he's not a guy that they're really high on here. I would love to see C.J. Prosise go to either Indianapolis, New Orleans, one of those couple of teams.
Mm-hmm. And one more guy, I would really like to see Jonathan Williams get a chance. I think he was very good at Arkansas. He had those 2 productive years where he was having to share the workload with Alex Collins. And then last year, his senior year, he missed the entire season because of an injury. But I actually prefer him to Alex Collins. I don't think he's going to be drafted before Collins, which is why in my rankings I have Collins higher. But if Williams actually does get drafted higher, I much prefer Williams. I think he does have workhorse potential. So if he goes in the 3rd round, top of the 4th round, I could see him being an interesting guy that really not many people are excited about, but a guy that I would like to be able to get on my teams at a decent price.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it. That's going to wrap things up. We want to go ahead and thank our guests, Rich Rebar, Andrew Scherer, 14-team mocker, and Nick Whalen. We thank John Moore for starting it off and holding it down before I got here, and Matt for finishing things up with us. Is there anything else you want to go ahead and get out before we sign off?
No, I think that's it. Everyone, thanks for joining us. I hope you had a good time watching, and hope you enjoyed the draft and your team drafted a player you don't hate.
All right, man. You take it easy. You have a good night, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of days.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right. Take it easy.